Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3, The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live today from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios here on the program. Ian is here today. Hello, Ian.
What up, what up?
I will tell you, I am very, very excited. I think we've got a very great show, but a lot of people are mad at me today. They were very upset yesterday. I don't know if you caught this, but yesterday I said that it'd be nice if Jeffrey Simmons would sack the quarterback or record a quarterback hit or would, more than one tackle for loss through 2 games. And my God, the amount of belly aching. You don't understand, Jared. No, I understand. You only want to hear good things. And I think most people aren't that way, but some people are that way. Well, today we're going to continue discussing what is real about the Tennessee Titans, no matter how it makes us feel. And when it comes to deciding what's real and what's not, one of the most important things that I believe in is what's called credibility. When somebody has an opinion, I want to know, okay, is this opinion somebody's true, actual feelings? Or is there a bias in there that tells me you want me to believe something for a significant reason other than the fact that it is the truth and it's what you believe? The second part of credibility is how much merit does what you say, given your level of knowledge, matter on the subject? For instance, Tom Brady's Fox's #1 analyst. You want to know why? Because Tom Brady has the credibility of being the greatest player who ever lived. Michael Jordan's never called a basketball game, I don't think, but if Michael Jordan decided, hey, I'd like to call a basketball game, you think Doris Burke would be somebody you'd want to listen to? Or you'd probably rather listen to Michael Jordan. And a lot of people have a lot of opinions, and a lot of those opinions come from a lot of different places. But there's one opinion that I really do value, and it actually resides at paulkaharski.com. It's not Paul Kaharski's. It's Blake Beddingfield, the former director of college scouting for the Tennessee Titans. Blake Beddingfield worked his way up through the Titans, was the director of college scouting, and was let go by John Robinson. But if you read the Athletic article that Joe Rexrode put together before Derrick Henry's final game with the Titans, you'll know it was Blake Beddingfield, who again now works at paulkaharski.com, that it was Blake Beddingfield who convinced John Robinson and Mike Mularkey to draft Derrick Henry. So I think his opinion counts. So at paulkaharski.com, he always does breakdowns after the game, and I find them incredibly insightful. And again, I don't think Blake has a bone to pick with the Titans. I don't think Blake is anti-Titans, and quite frankly, I don't think Blake is pro-Titans. I don't think there's anything in there that says, hey, talk nice about the Titans so that they'll be happy. They ain't going to rehire him, and he knows it. So after the game on Sunday against the Jets, Blake wrote his breakdown of the game. And I cannot explain to you how disappointed I was to read his comparison, but not surprised, of Titans quarterback Will Levis. Quote, Levis tries to do too much at times instead of taking what is there. He throws too often to predetermined areas, whether they are open or not. As example is the pass to Boyd, who was blanketed by the defender so well that the pass hit the defensive back in the back of the head. That was another example of a predetermined pass to a covered receiver. He has the same questions about him since college, and those intangible and instinctive traits are not there. Sometimes they are masked by outstanding physical gifts like size, arm strength, and or running ability. But ultimately, when the game speeds up, the lack of awareness and feel for the game exposes itself. Levis is early in his career and not a finished product, but he is starting to remind me of talented thrower with very good athletic traits, but ultimately just didn't have the feel and instincts for the game. He remade himself into a backup NFL quarterback and has had some occasional success in that role. Most notably when he beat the Houston Texans here and when he beat the Washington Commanders in a game in relief of Marcus Mariota. That's probably the most success Blaine Gabbert's had as a backup quarterback. 2 games into the season. 2, and I'm not going to sit here and poo-poo Blake Beddingfield. Again, I have a ton of respect for Blake Beddingfield. I know Floyd had a lot of respect for Blake Beddingfield. So when it comes to poo-pooing the guy who wrote the story, I'm not doing it because I value his opinion. Again, this is the guy that convinced John Robinson and Mike Mularkey, who both were not interested in drafting Derrick Henry, to draft the best player the Tennessee Titans have ever had. And again, it was so kind of the Titans to reward him by firing him for such a discovery. So 2 games into the season, when we've hoped and prayed and wondered, could the Titans find the guy? Could he be the guy? Could he be Dan Marino? Could he be Justin Herbert? 2 games into the season, and he is starting to convince the guy he's starting to remind the guy who convinced the Titans to draft Derrick Henry that he's big game Blaine Gabbert. The same game Blaine Gabbert, whose ineffectiveness as a backup quarterback, his limitations as your backup, forced the Titans to go out and use a 4th-round draft choice to get an insurance policy for Marcus Mariota in the form of Ryan Tannehill. Guys, this is the state of the Titans. All of the optimism, all of the sunshine pumping, all of the Brian Callahan interviews about, I think Will Levis is the guy. Remember, he said to Sports Illustrated, I told Rand Carthon, we don't need to evaluate quarterbacks this year. We have Will Levis. Remember talking with Taylor Lewan, Will Levis is a big part of the reason why I took this job. 2 games in, Blaine Gabbert. Ugh. So where do we go from here? Because that's the real question when it comes to the Titans. Again, he didn't say he is Blaine Gabbert, but he did say he's starting to remind me of Blaine Gabbert. And that is equally as dangerous. So once again, where do we go from here? And to me, I think there are 3 options. Number 1, hope Will Levis gets better. Do I think Will Levis will make a catastrophically stupid decision in every game the rest of the season? No. I don't think he'll make a catastrophically stupid decision every game the rest of the season. I mean, he can't, right? Granted, he's, 2 for 2. But it can't be. It's not going to be every game where he just turns around and hands the ball to the other team and says, please, go win the game. Will it make you feel better if you win this game? Here's the football. I don't think he's going to do that. But as far as anticipating throws, throwing wide receivers open, connecting consistently, I mean, we can hope. We can hope he gets better. That's option number 1. Number 2, throw in the towel and just put him back in there and feed him to the wolves, and let's hope the Titans are picking 1st or 2nd next year so we can start the cycle all over again and maybe find the guy. Again, I'm not the biggest Carson Beck fan in the world, but I mean, hey, maybe it might be better than Levis. That's on you. I don't know. Again, pick 1st or 2nd. I'm not interested in Shedeur. Not at all. I do like Ewers. Not a Jackson Dart guy. If we want to start getting 1st-round quarterbacks, we can do that probably sooner rather than later. But that's the 2nd choice. And the 3rd choice is bench him and go with Mason Rudolph, who I don't really like as a starting quarterback. But I do believe the Titans would be 2-0 if Mason Rudolph were the quarterback. Now, the good news, again, about the 3 options. Number 1, hope he gets better. Lord, please, please, please teach Will Levis how to throw a ball to a receiver while they're still in their break, as opposed to waiting for the guy to come out of the cut and to jump up and down and say, I'm open, I'm open, I'm open, for him to throw the ball, which is then covered, which is a lot of what Blake was talking about in his story at PK.com. Again, was this sentiment that Levis just waits for guys to get open and then he throws the ball. And in the NFL, it's too late. In college, you can do that. You can't do that in the pros. So there's hope he gets better. There's just throw in the towel and tank. And there's go to Mason right? They can give it a couple of more games. They've got a week 5 bye week, and maybe by then it won't be too late to make the playoffs if you make the move to Rudolph. I don't know. I think, personally, I think it would be too late. I think if you're going to go to Mason Rudolph, if you want to salvage the season because you think you've got a defense worth doing it, then I think you should probably go to Mason Rudolph now. I don't think your defense is that good. If your defense was that good, they would have forced a turnover over the first 2 games. They haven't even really come close. So I don't, for me, I just, hey, stay the course and see what happens. But again, they're telling you. They're telling you what they think of when, again, the guy who drafted Derrick Henry, who has the credibility, who is not biased, he's not pro-Titan, he's not anti-Titan, he tells you it's Blaine Gabbert. That is not good news. But again, personally, I think Levis's job is completely safe until that Indy game in week 5. But those are your 3 options. And then the second question is, again, if we think he might be Blaine Gabbert, when do you make the official decision that he is Blaine Gabbert? I'll never forget, I asked Mike Mularkey the day that he was named the official head coach of the Titans, losing the interim tag. And I said, J.P. Losman in Buffalo was a first-round draft choice, and he didn't work out when Mularkey was head coach. Blaine Gabbert was a first-round draft choice in Jacksonville, and he didn't work out. So what's different about Mariota? And Mularkey said straight up at the time, didn't throw anybody under the bus, but he said, well, those 2 guys weren't Marcus. Now, Marcus is a backup. But I think we can all agree Marcus probably had a better career than Blaine Gabbert. And since most of you don't even know who J.P. Losman is, I think that we can also assume that Mariota had a better career than him. Right now, that's who Will Levis is. No matter what Brian Callahan said in a podcast this summer, the proof is in the pudding. The saying in the NFL is the eye in the sky does not lie, i.e. the tape is the tape. And from somebody who actually knows how to translate the tape, I don't know how to translate this tape. A lot of these bozos that have NFL Plus on Twitter that are like, see, look at this play. Look at them break this play down. They don't know what they're talking about. Blake Beddingfield does. And he's telling you, you've got Blaine Gabbert at quarterback. So if you've got Blaine Gabbert at quarterback, what do? Do you ride it out and hope that he gets better? Do you tank? Or do you start thinking about the other guy? And then the second question is, when do you decide that he actually is Blaine Gabbert? But again, it is very, very, very discouraging that 2 weeks into the season, again, not 2 months into the season, 2 weeks into the season, here we are. And again, we knew this was a possibility. We knew it was a possibility. We knew that this, every time you take a young quarterback, you hope it's C.J. Stroud. It could end up being Bryce Young. You know this. I know this. We've all been through it. But the fact that we looked at these other teams and we said, God, we want a quarterback like Baltimore. We want a quarterback like Houston. We want a quarterback like Buffalo. We want a quarterback like Cincinnati. We want a quarterback like Kansas City. And to be 2 games into the year and know, oh, yeah, you've got the quarterback at Kansas City, the backup quarterback at Kansas City. Because, Ian, you want to take a guess who Patrick Mahomes' backup is?
Carson Wentz.
That's who you've got. You know who his backup was last year, Ian?
Was it Gabbert or Henny?
Big game Blaine. That's what you have right now. And it's incredibly disappointing. After all these months and months and months and months and months of talking, that here we are 2 weeks in, and it's like, yeah, he's probably Carson Wentz or Blaine Gabbert. Oh, God. 615-737-1025. That's how we're starting. 615-737-1025 here on our program. And I knew this would happen. I knew it would happen yesterday. It did. It came from the coach. And this, I knew it. And it happened. We'll get to it next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
This is the 22nd play of the half for Tennessee. The Jets have run 9 plays. That's it. Spears in there. 3rd and goal. Levis looking. Levis tripped. He tried to shovel it. That ball is free, and the Jets have it. We saw last week Levis trying to do too much, and it just happened again. Williams jumps on top of it.
And the reason it's the issue, backwards pass, not flipping it forward. If he flips it forward, it's an incomplete pass. Instead, he flips it backwards. It's a lateral and a free ball and turns it over.
And playing to the scouting report.
Oh, how about that? Ian Eagle saying, you know, he's playing to the scouting report, Charles, i.e., the Jets told us in our meeting before the game, yeah, we think Levis might do something stupid. And we know that they said that to Ian Eagle because Jermaine Johnson, and we hope Jermaine Johnson has a nice recovery from the Achilles tear that he suffered. Boy, he had a game, too, on Sunday before he unfortunately hurt his Achilles. You never want to see that. But Jermaine Johnson said last week, oh, yeah, we think we can get him to panic and that he'll do something stupid. And he did. And I knew when that happened, I just put my head in my head in my hands, and I said, you gotta be kidding me. You gotta be kidding me. I turned over to my buddy and I'm like, in fact, I'll be honest, a part of me felt at least a little justified because when I saw the stupidity of what happened in Chicago, I didn't chalk that up to inexperience or one game or anything like that. I mean, to me, he was a second-year, 25-year-old that just cost you the game on the road at Chicago and cost you from having a 1-0 season and wasted a great performance from your defense. Not an incredible performance because you didn't get any turnovers, but a great performance. And so when he made the second one, I'm like, he better win this game. Because to me, that moment cost them the football game. And Mike Greenberg, who is an ardent Jets fan, was on TV yesterday, and he said to the entire panel, I think it cost the Titans the game. The way it was going. At that point, the Titans had 14 minutes and 52 seconds time of possession, and the Jets had 6:22. The Titans had 79 passing yards. The Jets had 7. Aaron Rodgers, while he is still good and still knows the game, he's not MVP Aaron Rodgers. You put them down 10-0, totally changes the dynamic of the game and what the Jets have to do. Instead, I think the EPA of that play, according to Mike Sando and The Athletic, cost the Titans 4.6 points. So that's 5 points, according to the analytic guru nerds out there. Add 5 points at the end of the game. Now you're kicking a field goal to win. That's just that's just reality. But I knew the same thing that happened last week was going to happen this week. There was going to be a narrative shift. What people believed about Will Levis on Sunday and said on Monday would not be what was being said Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Yesterday, Brian Callahan went to the podium to talk about Will Levis's dreadful performance against the New York Jets and had this nice little cherry on top.
I think on the flip side is that Will did have a much better game than last week. I thought a lot of things he did, we saw improvement. That part was positive. I coach Will hard, but I do love him pretty hard too, and I think that's okay. I think we can have those moments, and unfortunately, an intense moment got captured because I'm also the head coach, not just the offensive coordinator, and so those conversations don't always get caught on television, and it happens a lot, but mine happen to be in front of everybody. So I don't regret it, but I do coach Will hard, and I think he's accepting of that coaching, and I thought he did a lot of things a lot better.
Did you like better? What were some things that he
Yeah,
did?
his footwork was much better. He played on time better. He was more accurate than he was last week. He looked more settled in. He managed it better this week. I thought he was, we tried to take some shots. I think we got to be better in protection to help him. But I thought his performance was improved, and I think that's what we're after is sort of weekly improvement. And I think if you take out that really silly mistake that he made and we get 3 points there.
Did you hear, Ian, did you hear the narrative changing?
Maybe a little.
The narrative changed.
He got better.
He got better.
I don't know about
if
narrative
you take
change,
that
but
play out of the game, he actually played pretty well. Mike Herndon had a similar tweet. If you take the bonehead play out of the game, Levis actually played pretty well. Except that's not really true. I'm fine with Levis staying the starting quarterback. I'm not calling for him to be benched, and I'm not saying that, hey, you're better off with Mason Rudolph in there full time. I mean, I think you're 2-0 right now if Mason Rudolph is your quarterback, but I don't think you're going to win the Super Bowl with Mason Rudolph. I don't think you're going to compete with C.J. Stroud if Mason Rudolph is the quarterback. So I'm not saying any of that. But, I mean, I think you're 2-0. And that wasn't the only bad play Levis had in the game. Levis threw a third down ball into the back of Tyler Boyd's defender. He underthrew the Burks interception. D-May swears up and down that Levis blew it on the Burks interception. And even the deep ball to Ridley that he threw for the touchdown was a bad throw.
It was double coverage.
The throw that he made that Ridley dropped was a much, much, much better throw than the throw that they scored a touchdown on. I mean, it was a bad throw. And to your point, in double coverage, it was a dumb throw. And it ended up being a touchdown, and it worked. So that was insanely lucky. Again, if you're an analytic guru and you love that EPA stat Joe Rexrode always talks about, then you will argue that Levis cost you the game. Because, again, the fumble cost the Titans 4.6 EPA. Again, 5 points. Add 5 points to the end of the game. Now you're kicking a field goal to win. If you want to round down, add 4. Now you're kicking a field goal to tie. So that whole, if you take that out, that doesn't matter because that play did cost them the game. And I hate when we do that because what it does is it marginalizes just how disastrous Sunday really was. But that's what happens. Everybody lived through the pain of the second half of the Chicago Bears game. And it was something on Monday, everybody had to vent out their frustration. But by Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, as the week progressed, everybody wanted to ignore it and wanted to pretend that it was just one game and Levis was going to learn and let's move on to the Jets. And that's exactly what's going to happen this week, which is let's move on. Let's not talk about how our quarterback sucks, Jared, because I don't want to hear about it. And he said he's rewiring his brain. Plus, coach said he actually played pretty well outside of that. By the way, I would expect Levis to play better in week number 2 than week number 1. Week number 1, they were on the road in a hostile environment and went to a silent count. This week, they were at home. That in and of itself makes a huge difference. So, I mean, I'm sorry. Like this idea that when it comes to Will Levis, that we just take out the bad and say, well, other than that, it was great. And so I'm nipping this in the bud right now. And I know what Brian Callahan's doing because he knows he chewed Levis out on TV. And I think he is disappointed he did that. I'm not. I don't have a problem with that. I don't think Levis is so soft that he can't take that. But I think he, wants to have a little positivity in there. Let's say, he did some good things. He improved from week to week. Well, I would hope so. It was one of the worst performances I've ever seen. It's ridiculous. Even a ball he completed that led to 3 points should have sent Tony Pollard to the hospital. So this idea of, oh, no, everything else was good. Please. He threw 2 interceptions. A touchdown came on a ball that should have been intercepted. He threw a ball that he's lucky didn't send his best offensive player to the hospital. He sucked, period. And that's without the stupid play. Because not one team in the NFL, if you said, hey, would you take this performance? Again, let's do it, Brian Callahan. Let's take the stupid play out. Not one team in the NFL would put their hand in the air and say, I volunteer for this. But again, I knew this was going to happen because it happened last week where we started to move away from the bad performance and make excuses and make ourselves feel better. And so you can't say it's only one game. You can't say that after week 2. So now this is the new excuse. This is the new narrative change. It'll be okay. He got better. Yeah, okay. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. I will say this. When it comes to Brian Callahan, sometimes guys are put in positions where they have to say things and they have to try things and they have to suck things up. And I think that's what Callahan's doing right now. But there was one cut he said on the Titans podcast, which is a very rosy and sunshiny place. There is one thing he said on the Titans podcast yesterday that I heard and I was like, Oh, boy. We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
It's happening in a great city of Nashville. Tone has a question for you.
Yeah, Shefty, there was a photo of Will Levis floating around the internet yesterday. Yep, that's it right there. I thought it was AI. Turns out that you go back and you watch the game. That was a real play by Will Levis where he tried to do the same that he does every single week. Is there any chance that they make a quarterback change in Tennessee based on Will Levis just not giving a shit about the football?
I don't think this early in the season. I think that Will Levis is the guy that they're going to continue. That is the play. That is the photo. It's a great photo, not AI.
Great photo.
Great play.
Yeah, Mason Rudolph is his backup, and Mason Rudolph played pretty well last year for the Steelers when he came on in relief at the end of the season. And I would think that obviously if he struggles at a certain point, they can make that decision later on. I don't see them doing that right now. I think that Will Levis has shown them enough. They've invested enough. I think they're going to continue to ride with Will Levis right now. I think those quarterback questions there are a little bit ways off right now. That's my sense.
All right, that was Adam Schefter on Pat McAfee. And I love the fact of the McAfee guys, who, again, they really have no bias Titan one way or another. McAfee likes the Colts, but I've never felt like McAfee's like an anti-Titan guy outside of the fun of kind of picking on the Titans at the draft. But Shefty's like, yeah, I don't think they're going to make a change anytime soon, which, again, that's a sentiment that I agree with in terms of I don't think the Titans will make a change. And again, I'm not calling for them to make the change. I just assume that they're going to lose. And then the question is, do you tank or do you try to win and salvage the season? And while I'm not a tanker, I mean, again, I don't even think you make the playoffs with Mason Rudolph. So what difference does it make? There was something Brian Callahan said yesterday. Because, again, Brian Callahan's going to tell everybody he believes in Will Levis until the day he benches Will Levis. And even when he does bench Will Levis, the way that the Carolina Panthers benched Bryce Young and told everybody that they still believe in him, he'll probably have a similar sentiment. But there was one very telling thing. Brian Callahan sat down with Mike Keith and Amy Wells on the Titans podcast yesterday. There was something on the Titans podcast I heard and my head went up. Now, you guys as fans may think this, but this is what Brian Callahan says he is preaching to his second-year quarterback.
A lot of playing quarterback in the NFL is doing boring things, doing mundane tasks, and that's completing the football, taking a check down, and holding onto the ball when you're getting sacked, and just take the sack. We'll live for the next play, as I've said a million times over my careers. There's a time and a place for trying to extend a play, for playing off the schedule and off structure with a little bit of recklessness, which requires. And then there's a time where just sometimes the sack is the best play, and you have to learn that. And I think we are on track to learn that at this point with Will, and he understands the situational part of it versus just the purely I need to make a play part.
Okay. Many people will hear that and say, well, duh, that's common sense. You think Houston's sitting down with C.J. Stroud saying, C.J., play boring? You think they sat down with Joe Burrow in Cincinnati and said, Joe, play boring? Do you think that teams with good quarterbacks do that? And you might say, well, but Jared, C.J. Stroud knows not to hand the ball to the other team to lose them the game. Right. But Sam Darnold has failed in multiple places. And I can tell you just by watching the highlights in Minnesota, they're not telling him to play boring. The reason that Brian Callahan is telling Will Levis to play boring is because he knows he sucks. Like, that was the first sign to me that Callahan knows it. Now, I mean, I think, again, the reaction on the sideline, that was a pretty strong tell. But, again, sitting down, the two things he said in that cut, hey, let's play boring. Sometimes, let's live to play another day. And I think, Ian, did you hear that emphasis he put on that? I think.
Oh, yeah.
Which is his way of saying, I don't know Levis is going to cut the stupid stuff out. He thinks Levis sucks. Like, that idea, again, he never sat down with Joe Burrow. I can promise you. Now, I bet they've sat down with Joe Burrow over the years and said, Joe, if you hold on to the ball too long, you're going to get killed because we don't have a line in front of you, which is probably a conversation he needs to have with Will Levis. But again, I'm telling you, they never told Joe Burrow to play boring. You don't tell C.J. Stroud to play boring. If Nathaniel Hackett and Robert Saleh had sat down with Aaron Rodgers before last week's game and said, hey, Aaron, just play boring. We just don't take any risks. Just play boring. Just take sacks. He'd have said, screw you, coach. And he'd have walked out of the room. Now, sometimes there is when you're going to go run, punt, and you got to tell the quarterback, like, hey, man, like, we think that team's quarterback sucks so bad that we're just going to Blake Bortles it. But even then, like, you tell that to Mariota. You don't tell that to Tom Brady. You don't tell Ben Roethlisberger, play boring, Drew Brees. No, you tell game managers that. You say, Ryan Tannehill, whatever you do not lose the game for us. Tua, whatever you do, just throw the ball in the vicinity of Tyreek. He'll be wide open, and then he'll run with it into the end zone for a touchdown. Just play boring. I can promise you the Bears are telling Caleb Williams a million things, and they're not telling him to play boring. Robbie Stanley just texted me, Ian. He said, hey, Malik played boring. Exactly.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
That's the point. Matt LaFleur sat down with Malik and said, play boring. Do not lose us the game. Malik said, okay, coach. And then they ran it 53 times. Callahan's telling you he thinks Levis sucks. And again, the emphasis on I think. Like hey, sometimes it's okay to take the sack. And I think he gets the message. Let me say this, Ian. I hope he got the message, but I wouldn't say I think he's got it.
Let's hope so.
Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com, 615-737-1025 on our program. One texter says, if Levis is not the guy, better hope Brian Callahan has the eye to identify an excellent decision maker and accurate passer in the draft, like Kyle Shanahan identified and found Brock Purdy. So I disagree with Joe Rexroad on a lot of things. This is one of the things I don't disagree with, which is if we're saying, hey, Brian Callahan's going to find our guy like Kyle Shanahan, Brock Purdy was not the hand-selected guy that Kyle Shanahan picked to lead the franchise. Ian, who was the hand-picked guy by Kyle Shanahan? All their names are like those, typical.
I thought they wanted Trey Lance.
Trey Lance, the hand-picked guy by Kyle Shanahan. They lucked into Brock Purdy the same way Belichick lucked into Tom Brady. The Bill Walsh is probably one of the smartest people to have ever roamed the planet when it came to football. Bill Walsh once said that Rick Meyer was the next Joe Montana. There's no exact science on this thing. None. But again, when it comes to, sitting there and looking at, you gotta hope Brian Callahan can find the guy. You gotta hope Brian Callahan has the experience to be able to tell you if Quinn Ewers can be an NFL player or not. Well, we gotta hope. Again, not to knock him, but he was the offensive coordinator in Cincinnati, which meant that his opinion was like third or fourth on the food chain when they picked Joe Burrow. And if I had been general manager in Cincinnati or head coach or offensive coordinator or owner, guess who we would have selected with that exact same pick? Oh, yeah, Joe Burrow. I know it's not that simple, but I hope you're right. But let's not forget, Shanahan's missed, Walsh has missed, Belichick's missed. I mean, a lot of these guys, we're going to see with Bo Nix and Sean Payton. We'll see. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We are back to your phones. 615-737-1025 here on the program. It's Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
How much confidence do you have in Levis?
I got plenty of confidence in Will. I believe in everything he's done so far, and we just got to keep working to get better. And he's made some mistakes that are costly, and I think he's learning from them. It's a painful lesson, and there's things that I'm learning about him that are helping me call the game better for him. And we're just going to keep at it. And there's really nowhere else to go but keep fixing mistakes and then trying to go win a football game. So that's ultimately where we're at, and I believe in Will and what he's capable of. And I thought his improvement this week was good. Obviously, the error aside, but there's been a lot of things he's gotten better at this week that I was happy with and pleased with.
That was Brian Callahan after the game. So tomorrow is kind of the start of the Green Bay week, or as we're dubbing around here, Ian,
Malik week.
Malik week. That's right. And again, I know that press conferences aren't the most important job of being a coach. I know they're not the most important job of being a quarterback, but just like anything else, they're important. This is when you connect with the fans. And they're important because everybody's going to hear what you say. And they're important because you have to win over your locker room. You've got to win over your team. And the one thing I wonder when it comes to being prepared for what's going to be put in front of them tomorrow, there's going to be a lot of questions about Malik Willis, which I think we would all expect. But more importantly, I really wonder if they're both prepared for questions about Mason Rudolph. Again, that's as close as Callahan has been asked to are you thinking about pulling the quarterback? What would you think about putting Mason in there? That kind of question. But there's been a lot of talk over the last 2 days about Mason Rudolph going in for Will Levis. And I'm not doing that Fox News thing that somebody did a couple of months ago where, Ian, I don't know if you saw this, but one of the reporters on Fox asked Joe Biden if he was too old to run for president. And then that person was on Fox saying, and they've been answering questions. It's like they answered the question you asked.
I missed that.
So it's not me. Like when I say there's a lot of chatter about Mason Rudolph, I mean, we've done our fair share of talking about Mason Rudolph, but I'm not talking about myself. I mean, they're talking about it on the Pat McAfee show with Adam Schefter. Mike Lombardi is saying, I'd go to Rudolph right now on his podcast. Today, Tim Hasselbeck said on the midday show, he was asked about Rudolph, and I think Willie asked Tim about the idea that the Titans would be 2-0 if Rudolph was the quarterback, and Tim said it was an unfair statement, but it might be true. So there's a lot of talk about Mason Rudolph. So for 2 days, there's been a lot of talk about Mason Rudolph, but that talk has not exited the outside sphere out here and entered kind of their, not literal bubble, but their figurative bubble with which they exist in. I don't know if guys in the locker room are talking about whether or not there should be a quarterback controversy. I'm not there. I can't speak on it. Nobody can speak on it unless you're on the team. But tomorrow, what usually happens is, and this is just my sense, is what usually happens is whatever discussions get drummed up by the fans end up being relayed to the media, which then ends up being asked by the media to the subjects. And so it would not surprise me if Will Levis is asked about Mason Rudolph tomorrow and about the idea of losing his job if he has another poor performance or he makes another massive mistake. I don't think Brian Callahan should be surprised if he gets asked about Mason Rudolph tomorrow. And when would you go to Mason? And do you think you'd be 2-0 if you had Mason? And at what point do you decide that Mason gives you a better chance to win? That is absolutely on the table tomorrow. And I wonder if they're prepared for it and what their answers would be. Alex from Franklin texts in and says, one texter, Alex from Franklin says, Jared, Will Levis, Brian Callahan, and Rand Carthon all go down together. They made this mess and don't know how to fix it. All three should be gone next year. I'm not going to tell you what's going to happen, what's not going to happen, because I don't know. As far as the decision-making around here about who's hauling off and getting fired, it's a wild card. And it's a wild card. It's not just me who says it. Like Willie's always talking about who knows, ownership around here is kind of a wild card and so on and so forth. But I don't think it's going to be a package deal. I think that we're going to continue this musical blame. I think Callahan, if it goes the way it's trending, Callahan will get another quarterback. Whether that's signing a veteran or drafting a new guy, he'll get another quarterback. I assume. Then again, who knows? Mike from Nashville says, come on, Stillman, move on. There are 21 other starters to talk about. Oh, dear God. You want to talk about Ernest Jones? Ernest Jones, so important. The Rams basically gave him away for free, has come in here and has made an impact, and you're not winning games. And you want to know why you're not winning games? Because of the quarterback. That's why you're not winning games. Stop with this foolishness of, we're making too big of a deal about the quarter. It's quarterback. I mean, at least the punt blocking for me is so easy and so simple. The punt blocking is, to me, that is, if they get another punt block, someone's getting fired. If not multiple people, and it should happen. And I don't care if it's 3 games in. Someone should get fired. That I'm fine with. To me, that's cut and dry. You get another punt block, you're going to lose another game. You get another punt block after the coach, after the game, said, that's on me, we're going to have problems. That's easy. The quarterback stuff, again, I don't know the answer. When do you make the move to the other guy? People are saying right now, outside of this city, even inside the city, people are saying they need to make the change, but people outside the city are saying they need to make the change. This is quarterback. And the Houston Texans are an example of the difference between what you look like when you don't have a quarterback and you're rummaging through with Tyrod Taylor and Davis Mills, and you do have a quarterback with what Deshaun Watson used to be and what CJ Stroud is. You know the difference. This is why it's so important. I mean, it's just, let's talk about the other 21 starters. All right, we want to talk about PT today, Ian? About PT gave up 13 pressures in the game, which is the most since 2018. I've only been telling you the entire offseason that they didn't have a right tackle. You guys told me they did. It was PT. He sucks.
Maybe he gives good fantasy advice, though.
And now he's got a new job as a fantasy expert doing some fantasy analysis for fantasy football. So the guy that got suspended for gambling is now working for a gambling company in his spare time.
Lots of spare time. Lots of spare time.
I mean, good God. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. So there is something that happened outside of the Titans yesterday. Bryce Young got benched by the Carolina Panthers. And that doesn't have anything to do with the Titans. But I think we can all agree that if Bryce Young's getting benched when he was the number 1 pick in the draft, I think there is a question of what does this mean for the Titans? And it opened my eyes today to a thought that I don't want to say it, but I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it. We're going to do it next. Stillman & Company right here on 102.5. Join me, Chris Sanders, and Derek Mason live at John Bon Jovi's, JBJ's, this Sunday from 9:30 to 11:30 for the award-winning pregame show, where we will break down the Titans' Week 3 matchup against the Packers. Malik Week. The award-winning pregame show is presented by Parman Tractor and Equipment, Sundeck, Nashville, and award-winning Blue Note Juke Joint and Blue Note Crossroads Bourbon. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3, The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. So Bryce Young got benched yesterday by the Carolina Panthers. Now, I have no idea if Bryce Young is the problem in Carolina as far as why they're 0-2 and why they're getting smoked by 30 points a game. I have no idea if Bryce Young is a good quarterback or not. I have not watched the Carolina Panthers, and I am not going to farm their land. That's their business. They stink, and they can continue to stink, and I'm not going to shed a tear for the Panthers. But here's the deal with benchings. Because a lot of people say, bench Will Levis. And okay, hold on. Here's the deal with the benching. You can say when you bench Bryce Young that it's not about Bryce Young, which is what Dave Canales, the new head coach who's coached Bryce Young all of 2 games, that's what he said yesterday was Bryce is still their guy. They still believe in him, but they believe Andy Dalton gives them a better chance to win. And you can say it's for the best to bench a young quarterback. And in some cases, it is. It worked for Bradshaw. It worked for Staubach. Troy Aikman got benched for Steve Berline. You don't really see it, though, in today's game because there's a message being sent. No matter what you say, it kind of sounds like you're pinning your problems on the young quarterback. We're 2 weeks into the season. Carolina has the 25th ranked defense. You have the first ranked defense. They have the 25th ranked defense. I can't imagine, and again, I haven't watched, but I can't imagine that Bryce Young is the problem in Carolina. Let me tell you who is the problem. The owner. And most of America knows it. That the problem with the Carolina Panthers, it's the owner. It's not the coach. It's not the GM. It's not the quarterback. It's not the last quarterback. It's not the last coach. It's not the last GM. And it's not the guys before them either. It's the owner. David Tepper, and I don't even know how he made his gazillions, bought the Carolina Panthers. And since then, he's made Jimmy Haslam look like the Rooney family. It's been that bad. The Panthers are 24-61 since he bought the team. That's good for 28%. That's awful. 28%. He's been through 7 head coaches. He is the most impatient goofball in the NFL. Which kind of takes me to the Titans. I remember the Thursday after John Robinson got fired on Tuesday. And look, I was on John Robinson's ass. I know I defend him now because all you guys do is think that he's the worst person in the world. And I just think that that's not fair given the fact that he won 61% of his games. Last time I checked, winning games actually matters. But the day John Robinson got fired, there was wild speculation about why the Titans would fire their general manager who had won 61% of his games, who had been to the playoffs 4 out of 6 years, who had never posted a losing record, who had had back-to-back division titles, and at 7-5 was sitting in first place in the AFC South on that day. Was it a power struggle between him and Vrabel? Did he anger the owner? Was it simply the A.J. Brown trade? What was it? I was hoping, and again, I'm glad this is not for Robinson's case, but I was hoping for the Titans that it was some sort of HR issue. The NFL did an investigation on that flight home from Green Bay when old Todd Downing had too many to drink. Could it have been that? Could it have been an audit of the financials show that the general manager was actually funneling money? Could it have been that? And by Thursday of that week, 2 days after he got fired, I had it nailed down that no, this was simply performance related. And I went on the air that day and I had my head in my hands and I said, oh, no. You just hauled off and fired a winning general manager while the team was in first place in the middle of the week before a divisional game. Oh, no. And a lot of you loved it. A lot of you were like, Amy put her foot down. You want to know how you've done since Amy put her foot down? 6-18. That's good for 25%. David Tepper owning the Panthers 28%. Amy Adams Strunk, since the day she fired John Robinson, 25%. Now, granted, the sample size isn't as big as Tepper's, which goes all the way back to 2018. But Amy Adams Strunk has something to prove to this fan base. It's time to call it like it is. And I do not take any solace in doing this because I really like Amy Adams Strunk as a person. She's been nothing but nice to me. And on top of it, I remember the way she treated Floyd on his way out. And I thought that that was really classy, and I'll never forget it. But again, this is football. Just like when she makes a change with a GM or a coach or whatever, and they say, we thank him for all he's done, and he was a great part of our organization, but we've got to move forward. That's what I'm saying right here. It's time for Amy Adams Strunk to get it together. Because it's very easy to look at Carolina and see, again, 28% of their games, and see the musical chairs at coach, 7 of them, and to see the constant changing of GMs, and to see the roster turnover. Goodbye, Cam Newton. Goodbye, Christian McCaffrey. Goodbye, Brian Burns. Goodbye, DJ Moore. You see the big trade they made to get Bryce Young. Now he's on the bench. It's all the owner. Nobody would have made that trade last year for Bryce Young except for the owner. I mean, I wasn't there, but I bet you the coach and the general manager were going to sit there and say, hold on, we're going to trade DJ Moore as part of this deal, but it's the owner. Amy Adams Strunk was loved by the fan base when she stayed out of it. When she had John Robinson and he was the general manager and he ran the football team and they went to the playoffs and went to the AFC title game and they had Mike Vrabel as the coach, she was loved. And the fans loved it when she fired John Robinson. But if I had told you at that point in time, for the next 2 years, you'd be as bad as the Panthers and you'd have fired Mike Vrabel, you'd have vomited right there on the spot. On that day in November of 2022, when you guys said, Amy put her foot down. Oh! If I told you, hey, by the way, a year and a half from now, you will be terrible. You will have won 6 games and Vrabel will be fired. You would have said, no, I didn't sign up for that. It was her name that was attached to the firing of John Robinson, her name on the hiring of Rand Carthon. It was her name on the firing of Mike Vrabel, and reportedly her name on the drafting of Will Levis. Now, I'm not going to say nobody in town will criticize Miss Amy, because I heard Robbie and Joe talking about it a little bit this morning too. I saw Chad Withrow say somebody's getting fired if they lose this week to Malik, because, well, we now know the reputation. Willie on the midday show kept calling her a wild card today. But I will say this until the cows come home, that while I respect Amy Adams Strunk as a person, and I think her heart is in the same place my heart is, which is she wants the Titans to win. That's where my heart is too. Sometimes you got to call a spade a spade. We laugh at Carolina. We laugh at the trades they've made. We laughed at the fact that Caleb Williams went to the Bears so they could draft Bryce Young, who they've already benched. We laugh at Carolina because they change their plans every 5 minutes. Well, from John Robinson and Mike Vrabel getting extensions in January of 2022 to both being fired less than 2 years later, don't you kind of get laughed at too? We laugh at Carolina because they change their quarterback every 5 minutes on the whim of the owner, from Cam to Teddy Bridgewater to Sam Darnold to Baker Mayfield to Bryce Young to Andy Dalton. Well, right now you have the worst quarterback in the NFL. I know we can laugh at the Panthers, but there's a lot of similarities. Now, this doesn't mean Amy can't revert to what she once was, because between 2016, when she really took over in 2015, and they fired Ken Wisenhunt, but like 2016, Robinson and Malarkey, that was kind of the Amy Adams Strunk era. Between 2016 to 2021, the Titans won a lot of games. And they did it, by my estimation, with a lack of influence from ownership. Yeah, ownership had to step in with the whole Robinson and Malarkey thing, which I didn't like very much. But for the most part, ownership stayed out of it. So she can revert to what she was, which won them a lot of games, which is why a lot of people got mad at me at the end of this year when I said that the end of last year, when I said, hey, if I own the team, I'm firing everybody. Cleaning house, starting over, hiring a GM who hires the coach, and staying out of it. And people said, you can't fire Rand Carthon after 1 year. And I'm like, it's not even really about Rand Carthon. It's really about the structure the organization's in. Like, I'm not giving Rand Carthon a promotion 11 months after I hired him, and they both, this Fakakta system she put in place, this shotgun marriage, failed miserably. It's time to start over. It's time to, again, put the GM in there, put the coach under the GM, let him run the team, and stay off to the side. And when she did that as owner, they won a lot of games. When she's had her hand in there more, they're drafting guards who aren't even good with the 11th overall pick. And instead of resetting and saying, you know what, we've been terrible since I hauled off and fired John Robinson, which it is the owner's job to fire the general manager and hire a coach. That is what the owner does. But they've been terrible since they decided to start doing it that way, instead of saying, okay, let's get back. Like, let's get back to what we were. Let's get it. Instead of that, they went the opposite way. They just blamed Mike Vrabel for everything and thought that spending money would fix it. If the money fixed everything, then a team like you that spent a bunch of it, or Carolina, or Denver, for instance, who has the most money in the NFL, they'd be better than a combined 0-6. Amy can right the ship. Like Tepper, and I don't know Tepper from a jar of Vicks, but it seems to me like Tepper in Carolina has zero self-control and zero self-awareness. Only a moron who cannot control themselves would chuck their drink into the crowd the way Tepper did last season when you're a gazillionaire and you know you're going to get sued for that. Like, only Tepper could do that. And I laugh at Carolina, and I know Carolina is not getting out of the weeds as long as Tepper stays in it. I don't care if the quarterback is Bryce Young. If they had drafted C.J. Stroud, they'd suck just as bad because Tepper would have found a way to screw it up. But Amy can right the ship. I don't trust that Tepper has any self-control to be able to do that. Amy can, because Amy's done it before. Because I've seen what the organization looks like when Amy hires a general manager and the coach and the general manager run the team, and Amy stays up in the owner's box and does owner things. You won 61% of your games. Since you fired John Robinson, you've won 25. So while she can right the ship, we need to take an evaluation of all the finger pointing and laughing we do at the Carolina Panthers. And we need to realize right now, you're closer to the Panthers than you think. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. And some people are going to interpret this as he's slamming Amy Adams. I'm not doing that. But it's calling a spade, and it's just pointing out that when she ran the team with the football people running the team and staying out of it, instead of this musical blame game they've played, they won 61% of their games. They won 2 divisions. They went to an AFC title game. They were good. They were very, very good. And since she's hauled off and fired John Robinson, you've won 25% of your games, changed your coach, changed your quarterback, and I'm sure there are probably more changes coming if we keep watching what we've been watching. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number if you want to weigh in. Now, what should she do? What should she do in terms of the current situation with the current quarterback? We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game.
At this moment that you make this change and set a new course for the Tennessee Titans, what does Amy Adams Strunk want Titans fans to know at this time?
I have high expectations, and I'll never apologize for that. And these fans deserve a great team, and they deserve a championship brought to the city. And that's what we're going to work towards. And I'm prepared to make the hard decisions to hopefully get us there sooner. This team has a bright future. We have ran. We have a promising young quarterback. I mean, the sky's the limit. We've got cap space. We've got a great draft position. Things are bright for the Titans. I'm really very, very optimistic. And I'd like to thank the fans for hanging with us this year. Our season was unacceptable, but we're going to get there. We're going to get there sooner rather than later.
That was Amy Adams Strunk when she decided to fire Mike Vrabel. And I got to tell you, if you had said to her, 2 weeks into the next season, Will Levis is going to be the worst quarterback in the NFL, and a mockery on national television, which he has been. I mean, he's been criticized by everyone from Rex Ryan to Bill Belichick. She wouldn't have believed you. But that's where we are. It's bad. This team stinks. I mean, and the quarterback, again, Blake Beddingfield, the guy who convinced the Titans to draft Derrick Henry, Blake Beddingfield wrote at paulkaharski.com that Levis reminds him of Blaine Gabbert. Not exactly the picture she was painting there when she decided to fire Mike Vrabel. So then the question has to be, if my thing is, hey, ever since Amy kind of took back the organization, John Robinson ran it. Mike Vrabel was under Robinson. They butted heads. It seems like they butted heads a little bit, but I think for the most part, they were fine. But from that moment on, you have won 25% of your games. You are 6-18 since the day you decided to fire John Robinson. Again, remember, Robinson won 61% of his games. You can bitch about him as much as you want, but he won 61% of his games. He inherited the worst team in the league, and they were in the AFC title game. And I don't know about you guys, but the AFC title game does not seem very close anytime soon. It's obvious that she's had more of a hand in all of this. And I think that's a bad thing. So then, when it comes to the current direction the Titans are in, and the current direction when it comes to the young quarterback, here's what my advice for this moment in time would be. Stay out of it. When it comes to Will Levis, and I don't think it's bad to have the coach talk to the owner. The coach should talk to the owner. The owner should be advised on big decisions. The owner, when it comes to a first-round draft pick, when it comes to a quarterback, when it comes to the owner should be a part of the decision-making process. I get it. The buck stops with the owner. But ultimately, the owner has to let the people that she's hired do their jobs. Not fire them in the middle of the season because A.J. Brown spanked the goalpost. So in this case, if Brian Callahan wants to change the quarterback, he's going to have to talk to the owner about it ahead of time. And he should talk to the owner about it ahead of time. In fact, if I was the owner and you changed the quarterback without talking to me, you'd be fired. But if I owned the team and Brian Callahan sat down with me and said, look, we'd be 2-0 with Mason. And I know I signed up because I had a plan for Will, but I didn't know Will. And I'm telling you right now, these moments where his brain clicks off whenever the game matters the most, we can't have that, and it's not going to work, and I want to make the switch. If I own the team, I'd say it's up to you. It's your call. Stay out of it. That's the best thing I can say. The owner will always be entitled to big decisions, and the owner should always be a part of the big decisions because, again, you own the team. But my advice for the situation right now, like if they lose to Malik on Sunday, I mean, she's going to want to do something. You guys know her. That would be my advice. Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com, 615-737-1025. Ben is up next here on Amy Adams Strunk. Thank you for calling and waiting. Ben, go ahead.
Hey, Jared, thanks for taking my call. And I just want to tell you, thank you for having the nuts to call her out on this, and I know that you're not trying to be negative in any way. You're just stating facts. But I had said the same thing to the late morning show, to Willie and them, right before the season started, because they had posed the question of, what is the biggest thing that the Titans can do to, right this ship? And I said exactly that. I said, Amy needs to stop doing her best impression of Jerry Jones and get her hand out of the pot. And you could have heard a pin drop. Those guys did not want to say anything about that. And they were like, hey, thanks for your call. But that is the fact, and that is true. And I'm glad that you see it. I'm glad you're calling it out. I'll let you carry on. Thanks again for taking my call, bud.
Sure. I mean, again, I don't take any joy out of that. I like Amy Adams Strunk. And let me say this, because some people just get mad and they're just sell the team. And I don't believe in that. And I'll tell you why I don't believe in that. You know, it's kind of that devil you know theory. All the NFL cares about is the value of the franchises. That's why they've allowed teams to take on private equity. If the Titans were to go up for sale, they're not getting sold to some celebrity that it would be cool that Bon Jovi owns the team. They're getting sold to whoever's willing to pay the most. And I don't know if you guys have taken notice of the richest owners in the NFL, but they ain't the brightest. Arthur Blank in Atlanta, and I know they won last night in miraculous fashion. Arthur Blank in Atlanta overreacted so badly to Desmond Ridder that he fired the coach, signed Kirk Cousins, and wasted the 8th pick on a quarterback who's not going to play. He did a great job with Home Depot, though. On the other side of it, Tepper in Carolina, we've been up and down about him. The Walton family in Denver, 0-2 with Bo Nix. They just throw money at it. Russell will throw money at him. That doesn't work. We'll throw money at him to leave. Sean Payton will throw money at that. Sean Payton wants his quarterback. We end up drafting Bo Nix, 0-2. And Bo Nix might be fine, but again, Denver just keeps throwing money at the problem. And that's what happens in this league is they'll vote to put the richest person in there to own the team. And that usually means that the person that is so rich wants to show their daddy dogs off and they want to build it themselves. And I don't want that. I just want Amy to go back to the way she was between 2016 and 2021. And that does not mean that I want John Robinson back. I'm not saying that. Right now, as much as I really don't think of Ran Carthon, again, and Mike Lombardi's trying everything to pin Will Levis on Ran Carthon, and kind of the local gaslighting has done everything to try to not have Ran be responsible for Will Levis. But again, regardless of how I feel about that or the coach or whatever, I'm saying that the owner needs to stay out of it and just needs to be the owner. And then I think that the job for the owner at the end of a season is to evaluate where the franchise is. And if you don't like the direction, then fire the general manager, then fire the coach. But this whole oh no, Mike Vrabel is the savior, but we're going to go get him a GM. That does not work. Because then what happens is 5 minutes later, Mike Vrabel's the problem. And it's just going to keep going over and over and over and over. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. More of your phones on this because a lot of people do want to weigh in. 615-737-1025. Plus, I'm a little worried, not super worried, but there was something that was reported out of Green Bay that worries me that I may be robbed of what I'm dreaming of. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 615-737-1025. Speaking of Daddy's Dogs, that's right. This week's best deal, it's 2 Daddy's Dogs. Nashville's biggest and best gourmet hot dogs. Whether you're taking your office lunch to the next level or saving your life on the late night streets of Broadway, you can't go bigger or better than Daddy's Dogs. Go to theGameNashville.com/deals to get half off a $25 gift card while supplies last. And tune into the Chase and Big Joe show tomorrow from 9 to 11 a.m. for your chance to win all-inclusive tickets in the Eurostone Club to see Kings of Leon live at Bridgestone Arena on Thursday, September 26th. Contest presented by Green River Whiskey. Green River Distilling Company, Owensboro, Kentucky. Alcohol by volume varies by product. Please drink responsibly.
Potentially seeing Malik on Sunday, he obviously knows you guys, you know him. What are kind of the dynamics when that happens, when you know each other so well?
I think there's probably a small advantage in him knowing enough about our people and our scheme and all those things. Obviously played against our defense for an entire training camp and off season. So there's some things that he probably knows that the average player coming to play wouldn't. So there's probably a small informational advantage there. He knows the personnel, which is always good for a quarterback to have some familiarity. But I'm truthfully, I'm proud of Malik. I'm happy for him that he found a way to go in there and win that game. That was really cool to see for him, and he's did a nice job for him. And we're going to have our work cut out for us. They ran the ball like crazy. They did a great job. Malik did a really nice job of taking care of the football and giving them a chance to win the football game. So excited for Malik, and hopefully that we play better than they do on Sunday.
There you go. That was Brian Callahan talking about Malik Willis. And I think we're getting Malik Week, which again, to me, this is like the ultimate showdown. Malik Willis, who was discarded in the dumpster by the Titans for a 7th round pick. The same thing they gave up for Leroy Watson, who they would turn around and cut, is what they got in exchange for Malik. So Malik Willis against the Titans on Sunday. And here's why I love the idea of Malik Week. If you play Malik on Sunday, you should win. You're favored to win, and I think you will win. So at least you'll get off the schneid, and you won't start 0-3, 0-5, 0-8, something crazy like that. If you lose to Malik, and it's 0-3, again, we've been talking about Amy, and about the fact that, hey, Amy hauled off and fired John Robinson when they were in first place, and they've won 25% of their games since then. I said it at the time, and I was not a fan of a lot of the moves John Robinson was making. John Robinson was not happy with me at the time of his firing. I'll tell you that right now. But he did win 61% of his games, and they were in first place. And she still was mad enough about A.J. Brown spanking the goalpost that she hauled off and fired him. You don't think she's going to lose her marbles? Lose her marbles if they lose to Malik on Sunday? She's going to go crazy. So I'm very excited about what happens in Malik Week. Either the Titans win a game, or we'll have probably the definition of rock bottom, where even the bobos in the YouTube chat who are, it's only 2 games, Jared. Last week it's only 1 game. Now it's only 2 games. The bobos in the YouTube chat won't even be able to defend it. And here's what scares me about Malik Week is that Robbie Stanley kept texting me last week about how he thought, hey, Jordan Love might play against the Colts. And they're saying Jordan Love might play and Jordan Love this. And this is what Rob Domofsky, who's covered the Packers forever for ESPN.com, same job as TD. Here's what Rob Domofsky said on the Dan Le Batard show.
I think next week, if Malik Willis does have to play again, and I'm not convinced that he's going to, from what I was told, Jordan Love was very close to playing.
I was told Jordan Love was very close to playing. I'm not convinced Malik's going to play this Sunday. No. Give me Malik. This is what the Titans have saw ever since Green Bay. Wouldn't this just be so fitting that it kind of feels like all this bullcrap started at Green Bay? The last win of the Robinson era when they went on the road, Thursday Night Football, and they beat Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, and it was the highest of the highs. And that's why I cannot imagine at 7-3, having beaten the Packers in Green Bay, that she had her hand on the nuclear button right there on Robinson. I cannot imagine it, but I guess it's the case. And then to see how bad it's been, to where if you had told me that night, I was at Lambeau Field, there were a lot of Titan fans at Lambeau Field that night that were celebrating the Titans' victory. The Titans were viewed as a contender right there with Kansas City, Buffalo, and Cincinnati. And the idea that if you had told me that the Titans are going to win 6 games over the next 2 years and Malik Willis is going to come into Nissan Stadium and beat them, I'd have said that has to be the single worst case scenario of anything ever. There's no way that could have been true. And so for me, if you're going to lose to Malik, if you're going to be this bad, give us the Malik game where it's either an easy victory or a rock bottom loss. That's all I ask. That's all I ask. Not Jordan Love getting in there. And then, Levis goes 21 of 33 for 206 and 2 picks, and you lose to Jordan Love. And, well, it's just 3 games, Jared. No. Give me Malik. Because if they lose to Malik, I don't even think the bozos that are making every excuse in the book for the Titans, I don't even think the post-game radio show can put lipstick on that pig. I mean, I don't think you're polishing that turd. So give me Malik. Malik versus Levis. And honestly, I'll be at the game Sunday. I don't care who wins. I'll enjoy it either way. I do not care. Do not give me Jordan Love on Sunday. 615-737-1025. Ian, this would be a good question for Robbie Stanley.
Mm-hmm.
Who would he rather have start the game on Sunday for the Packers?
Well, he wants to win.
Well, but you know as well as I do.
What's fun for the show?
Well, I mean, just like this show will be, a blaze at 2:00 on Monday if they lose to Malik. He knows that's the same for them at 6:00.
And part of me, this is really a bad fandom of me, but part of me is rooting for Malik to win.
I will tell you, I do not care who wins on Sunday. This team stinks. The quarterback stinks. The backup stinks. There's no way around it. Like, they're not going to, unless they go sign Tannehill. And even then, we know there's a ceiling with Tannehill, and Tannehill's not coming back here. But, so whatever. With Green Bay, if they lose to Malik, at least it's fun. At least it's fun. I don't know who I want to win. I'm okay with whoever wins if that's the case. All right, phones, 615-737-1025. It's Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
it might be a tough sell, especially to Amy Adams Strunk, who basically hired Brian Callahan to try to bring out the best in Will Levis. It would not look good to scrap it after 2 games. So could you sell this, Tim? I'm taking a step back with my young guy. I want to see what it looks like with the other guy, but my full intention is to bring him back in as the starter down the road after a game or two. It's a tough sell. I wonder how the owner would take that, knowing how much of a wild card the owner is. But could you sell that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think you could sell a plan. Like, hey, this is what we're doing. We're not turning the page, but like this is our plan. Like, we're not scrapping it. We still believe in them. We're still going to develop them. But like, sometimes we do think it's necessary in extreme situations to take a step back and watch someone from the sideline. Like, you want to be the first person that like had that idea for the development of a quarterback. But I also, I would argue, that you get better by doing it and making the mistakes.
That was Hasselbeck today saying, yeah, you could sell a plan, I guess, maybe. Who knows? Back to your phones, which are driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. I just want to say this. One texter says, Amy is a terrible owner. I put the word terrible in there for a word that you can't say on the radio. You claim to be a Titans fan and don't care if we lose week 3. What a joke. Guys, I told you all offseason you don't have a right tackle. You all argued with me or argued about the merits of the story or argued if the story was valid given the situation. And your right tackle on Sunday allowed 13 pressures, the most in a game since 2018. I knew this was going to be a tough year. I didn't think Levis would stink this bad, but I knew this was going to be a tough year. If this team's going to be bad, it'll be bad tremendously. Let's get the first pick. Let's not be bad and win 6 games and do what we did last year. I'm not up for that. Sorry, not into it. Let's go to Steven, who's up next here on our program. Has been waiting patiently. Steven, go ahead.
Hey, Jared. I was curious, with the Titans having a 250 win percentage since they fired Robinson, I agree with you. But I think a lot of this team's issues is a talent deficiency, which is where Robinson failed in the first place. So what do you think? Obviously, transitive properties don't work here. But what do you think the Titans' record would have been over the same time span had they not fired John Robinson? I'm just curious what you think kind of the outcome would have been.
So I can only give you the outcome that would have happened the next week. I think they would have beaten Jacksonville. And if they had beaten Jacksonville, we know that means they would have won the division that year. And I appreciate your call. And that's probably why she did it when she did it. I mean, she probably fired Robinson. Like, the A.J. Brown thing was probably the icing on the cake where she decided, okay, I'm going to fire him. But she probably fired him ahead of the Jacksonville game because she knew that if they won the Jacksonville game, they were probably going to win the division. And if they won the division, how do you fire a general manager after winning 3 straight divisions? That is reasonable. What I would have done, Robbie Stanley has gone on the record and said that he would have fired Robinson at the end of the year. And while I probably would have disagreed with it, thinking that Robinson was entitled to at least another season and the next quarterback, I will say that I could have lived with. And I'm not saying Robinson and Vrabel should be the coach and the GM now, but it's the fact that she fired him at 7-5 that showed me no sense of awareness, no sense of understanding how this league works. That's not what you do. You don't fire your GM in the middle of the work week of a divisional game when you're in first place. You don't do that. And who's to say that Robinson wouldn't have had another 2016 or 2019 level draft? And if he hadn't and it was bad, then go ahead and fire him and start over and fire Vrabel too. But this idea that, this idea of, Robinson did stink on some of these drafts. I'm not arguing that now. I am not arguing it one iota, period. I mean, it was bad. And the things weren't trending in the right direction, and they had a 270-pound left guard, and they didn't have a right tackle. And I'm not arguing that. I mean, I was disappointed in John Robinson there at the end. But again, just firing him in the middle of the year while you're in first place. At some point, winning matters. See, this is what I don't get about some of you guys. Some of you guys are like, who cares that we were in first place and John Robinson won 61% of his games? He sucked. And the same people are the let Rand cook. He's cooking, Jared, and you won't give him credit. And I'm like, he's 6-13. 6-13 as general manager.
Everyone blames J-Rob for bare cupboard and no salary cap.
I don't get the cap. I don't get this. I don't get where winning no longer became the number one thing that defines whether or not you're good. I don't know what this is. Your vibes matter more to you than the record. And I'm sorry, this is the NFL. Records matter. One texter says, I don't understand why fans don't realize you should either be a contender for the championship or you should lose as many games as possible to improve your draft. Preds fans are the same way. Being mediocre for a long period of time is the worst case scenario. The difference is with the Predators, and I'm not the biggest believer Saros can do this. Like, I just want everybody to know this. I'm not the biggest believer that Saros can do this, but with the Predators, like, I know that if you have a team that gets to the second round of the NHL playoffs, you have a chance to win the cup. And that's why, again, it's more wide open than you think. Like, it is not to say if you had beaten Vancouver last year, you would have had a team capable of winning the cup, but this year's team might be that kind of team. I don't think the NFL works that way. Like, either you've got that quarterback right now in the AFC or you don't have that quarterback. And the Houston Texans are the example. They've got that quarterback. And Houston is a legitimate Super Bowl contender, period. They've got a defense, they've got receivers, they've got an offensive line, and they've got a quarterback. They've got a shot. And how did Houston get that quarterback? They lost a lot. Tony is up next here on our program. Thank you for calling. Thank you for waiting. Go ahead, Tony.
Yes. Who drafted Malik Willis?
John Robinson did.
Huh?
John Robinson did.
Okay, wasn't what's his name? There used to be an offensive coordinator at Green Bay now. What's his name?
No.
No. I said, wasn't he here then?
No, he was not. Tony, what's the take?
Okay. Well, what I'm saying is that when Malik Willis became available, he didn't waste no time at all getting that young man. Malik, how can I say this? The young man is very efficient. Whether anybody want to give him
I watched that game. Tony, thank you for your call. I watched that game. The Packers basically said we're going to run the ball on every play. They had one throw to the outside that Malik just threw a beautiful ball, on his little out route that ended up being the first touchdown. I mean, it was a beauty. And Greg Olsen on the broadcast was like, if he hangs that 1 inch short, it's a pick six. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's pure luck, but I feel like I have a pretty good knowledge of Malik Willis. And then after that, Malik had confidence and he played with a lead and they ran the ball. And I mean, Malik sucks and everybody knows it. And that defense the Colts ran, you know what? I'm going to say on the other side, because I'm going to address two things. Number one, Malik versus Indy and what actually happened, not what the box score said, but what actually happened, and the people that are just going crazy about Anthony Richardson sucks, Jared. We'll address it all next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3, The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. So I did sit down and watch some games yesterday that happened on Sunday. The condensed game feature, if you've got NFL Plus, is very, very convenient. It takes an NFL game and puts it into like 45 minutes, 35 minutes. You know, it's just play. And since I watch the Titans games at the stadium and I sit there and see what happens in the Titans games, and the only thing we get in the stadiums are the scores around the league just popping up on the side scoreboard where it's like, oh, wow, Denver is leading. Oh, wow, New England is beating Seattle. You know, that's all we get. And then they have a couple of highlights in there where they're like, let's take a look at what's going on around the league. Alvin Kamara, the former Vols fans, has 3 touchdowns today. You know, that's all we get in the stadium. So, and the one thing I will not do is I will not pretend to have watched a game that I didn't watch. That gets you in trouble in this industry. And far too many people do it. So when it comes to, you know, Bryce Young getting benched by the Panthers, I know Stephen A. Smith had this huge reaction today. How much Carolina Panthers do you think Stephen A. Smith has watched over the last 2 years? But yesterday, before the show, because the Titans are getting ready to play the Packers, and because Indianapolis is in the division, I decided to watch the condensed game between Green Bay and Indianapolis. Because, number one, I knew that Malik Willis was going to be a big topic on the program this week, and I had already been getting texts and tweets and everything else about, you liked Anthony Richardson, Jared, and he sucks. So let's tackle both at the same time. I watched the game. Anthony Richardson is not the problem in Indianapolis. Again, I can't tell you what Bryce Young is or isn't because I don't watch the Panthers. I do watch the Texans. C.J. Stroud is that dude. I know what Will Levis is. And Anthony Richardson is not the, and again, underline the, he's not the problem in Indianapolis. When they drafted him, and I would have moved heaven and earth to go get Anthony Richardson and then to run right to the podium and tell the media that Ryan Tannehill is the starting quarterback. Indianapolis didn't do that. And when Indy drafted him, I said, well, you know, the one thing you got to remember is there's a chance that Indy's stupidity, led by their owner, do you know how many shots Michael Jordan missed, could ruin him the same way they ruined Andrew Luck. Shane Steichen calls QB sweeps for him in year one. He gets hurt 4 games into the season. Out for the year. So again, when they drafted him, I hated it because I loved Anthony Richardson's talent. And that talent, even in the 3 interception game he had, which was really more of a 2 interception game, and the third came on a Hail Mary at the end of the game. But, I mean, the talent is just through the roof. Footwork, not so good. They're going to need to work on that. But their game plan in Indianapolis on both sides of the ball was atrocious. Just atrocious. On offense, the Indianapolis Colts threw the ball 34 times for Anthony Richardson. They gave it to Jonathan Taylor 12 times. Taylor had something like 108 yards. And every time Taylor got the ball, Quentin Nelson got out there and blocked a linebacker, and Taylor went off and ripped off 17 yards. Every time he got the ball. But they only gave it to him 12 times. I texted a former NFL head coach after the combine last year. And I said, if I'm the Indianapolis Colts, I'm either signing Gardner Minshew from Philadelphia and running the Jalen Hurts offense, or I'm bringing Matt Ryan back. And I am drafting Anthony Richardson, and I am signing Dalton Schultz and putting him at tight end, and I am saying Anthony Richardson sits behind Matt Ryan or sits behind Gardner Minshew, and then when he gets in there, I'm going to turn around and hand the ball to Jonathan Taylor 100 times a game. They gave it to him 12. Stupid. Then the other side of the ball. They just let Green Bay run the ball every play. I mean, again, Indy plays that kind of Tampa 2 defense where you can run the ball effectively against that. But at some point, you got to put your foot down and say, okay, we're bringing more guys up. The old man used to always say on the show, the GM, he used to always say, I can stop the run because I'll just bring up one more than you can block. And it took Indy until they were down 10-0 and Josh Jacobs had ran the ball 20-something times before they started putting guys in the box. Greg Olson on the TV broadcast is like, you wondered how long it would take Indy to make the adjustment. I mean, listen to Bill Belichick. Pat McAfee loves the Colts. He was, again, the game plan was so bad. And I'm going somewhere with this, but just listen to McAfee and Belichick talk about how bad Indy's game plan was that allowed Green Bay to run it 53 times with Malik at quarterback.
Should I panic completely? Or is this just, hey, and I don't want your Colts bias to come through. I would like actual football answer here. Should I be panicking right now or no?
Well, look, I would say the way I look at the game, Pat, is that at some point you've got to be able to stop the running game at some point. And so if whatever you're doing isn't working, then you go to the next step, whether that's bring another guy into the front, whether you stunt the front, whether you bring in a bigger player to, be more of an anchor on the line of scrimmage, whatever it happens to be, you find a way to stop. And if that doesn't work, then you go to the next step. And whether you go to that final step in a 4-minute offense where you're trying to get the ball back, or whether you go to it, in a short yardage situation. But I think you have to have a way going into the game. And I always told our defensive coordinators this is, okay, what are we going to do to stop the run? Like, what are we going to do if they get this going, whatever it is, their stretch play, their counter play, what are we going to do to stop this? And if our base isn't good enough, then we got to have whatever the next step is. And if that's not good enough, then we got to have another level after that. That's the way I looked at it. And so I think the way the Colts better look at it this week is, they had such a tough time with Green Bay. Really, it's been 2 weeks in a row that whatever they need to do, they better figure out something to do with this week, or this movie's just going to keep showing. It's going to be the same thing all over again.
It's hilarious, Ian. Belichick, and Floyd used to do this when he was on the show. Belichick won't just come out and say the game plan was bad, but he'll tell you exactly what he would have done, which is the opposite of what they did.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's like, I told my coaches, if they start running, what are we going to do? And if they don't do this ahead of week 3, then it's going to be, i.e., Indy was so ill-prepared, so poorly coached on both sides of the ball on Sunday, which now leads me to Malik. I don't know how Indy could have approached a game with Malik at quarterback and not thought, well, you know what they're going to try to do? They're going to try to run the ball. And they're going to try to make these easy access throws from Malik, these low dangerous throws, these low danger throws, and maybe Malik can hit 1 or 2, and that's going to be their game plan. It's almost like Indy sat there and said, let's prepare for Jordan Love no matter what, and we'll run the same defense regardless of who the quarterback is, which is stupid. Maybe they bought all the smoke screens that Jordan Love might play this week, and Matt LaFleur's not ruling him out, and maybe they bought that. I don't know. But that game plan was so atrocious. Now, I say this by saying I knew the result of the game when I watched it. So it's like I could watch what wasn't working, and I knew it wasn't going to work. To just sit there and say the game plan was bad. But I really believe that if I had been watching that game from the start and I had seen Green Bay just rip off run after run after run, and it could have been much worse. Josh Jacobs fumbled the ball inside the 10-yard line. It could have been much worse for Indianapolis. If I had seen that game in live time, I would have said, what is the matter with this? We're just letting them run all over the place. And then the Richardson side of it, for all you people out there, Anthony Richardson sucks, Jared. You said you would have drafted him. As if it makes you feel better about yourself that your quarterback stinks. Anthony Richardson didn't make any single decision that was so unfathomably stupid that cost them the game. He threw 1 interception on a ball he overthrew for Alec Pierce. Bad footwork. He looked like Vince Young, kind of sidewalking the ball, which we said when it came draft time, like if you draft Richardson, he started 6 games. He's 21 years old. You're going to have to work on that development, the footwork, the mechanics, all of it. Like he's going to have to get better. And they got him hurt, so he couldn't get better. But there was the one on the overthrow for Alec Pierce. There was one throw where A.D. Mitchell wasn't looking for the ball. There was another one where it hit A.D. Mitchell square in the hands. The last ball he threw that was interception was on a Hail Mary. I mean, they had an opportunity in the third quarter to kick a field goal and missed it in order to make it a one-score game. Anthony Richardson's not the problem. Now, it may not work for Richardson and Indy, but I still see the talent. And my thing with Richardson is I don't think this is a Richardson problem. I think this is an Indy problem. Just like it wasn't an Andrew Luck problem in Indianapolis. It was an Indy problem. And so I'm just saying when it comes to where Malik is right now, don't be fooled that they won that one game and think, oh my God, we got to be worried about Malik. So add that to the list, 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025 here on Stillman and Company. We'll get to your phones next. 1025-1063 the game. Let's talk FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel Sportsbook is my official sportsbook app. And who is ready to watch more and more NFL? Well, FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and they're going to continue their special offer to keep us watching more. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment. And yes, you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/JGM to download America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/JGM. 21 and over and present in Tennessee. Full price of NFL Sunday Ticket will be automatically charged seasonally after free trials. No refunds, terms, restrictions, and embargoes apply. Gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789.
I think next week, if Malik Willis does have to play again, and I'm not convinced that he's going to, from what I was told, Jordan Love was very close to playing.
Oh, no, that was Rob Domofsky again. He covers the Packers for ESPN, saying there was a chance Jordan Love was going to play. Now, Ian Rappaport's come out and said they're targeting week 5 for Jordan Love. I don't care what happens with Jordan Love. I just don't want Jordan Love to play on Sunday. I either want the Titans to win or I want them to lose to Malik. You know, there's fun for me either way. By the way, I got to just, before we get to your phones, Ian, I got to call out these freaking crybabies.
What crybabies?
Just the YouTube chat, the text line, this idea of like, Jared, you say you're a Titans fan and you say you're rooting for Malik to win. I didn't say I was rooting for Malik to win. I said I'm fine either way if Malik wins or if the Titans win, because if the Titans lose to Malik, it will be absolute rock bottom, and then we will know that they suck. Then there is no question. It's only 2 games if they lose to Malik. Like, then it is
some clarity.
I mean,
yes.
Right. This idea that it's like, oh no, oh no. Stop crying. John has been holding patiently and is up next on Will Levis. John, thank you for waiting. Go ahead.
Hey, Jared, thanks for taking my call, man. I just got a question for you. Do you think maybe you missed your calling in life? Maybe you should have been a GM or a scout or a coach, because you seem to have a really strong understanding of who's talented, who sucks, how things work. I'm just curious, did you coach some, or did you grow up a great athlete or anything like that? I'm just curious about your background.
Well, I think you're being sarcastic, but I'm going to take what you said as a compliment. Here's my question for you, though, is which one of these do I need to be in order for what the point you're trying to make is my opinions aren't justified, but which one of those do I need to be? Because there's a big difference between Bill Belichick and a great athlete. So do I have to be Bill Belichick for my opinion to count? Or if I was Vince Young, does my opinion count?
No. I'm being sincere. It just seems like you have a real grasp of how all these things work. And just curious, did you ever consider maybe being a scout or GM or assistant GM or a coach?
Well, I mean, you don't just drop off your resume and apply to be assistant GM.
Oh, okay. I get it. Did you play football growing up? Or
I did not play football growing up.
Okay. I was just curious. I appreciate you taking my call. Thanks.
All right. You bet, John. And I don't believe in his sincerity.
Yeah, doesn't sound like it.
But what I am going to say is I'm just going to say what defines somebody who's allowed to talk about football. Because I hear a lot of people on ESPN talking about football that played football that don't have any idea what they're talking about. And I mean, again, I've seen Isaiah Thomas, who is probably one of the best, 10's probably a stretch, one of the 15 best basketball players of all time. Isaiah Thomas was a terrible coach, a terrible general manager, and a terrible commentator. He was terrible at all 3. Magic Johnson was a terrible general manager, a terrible coach, and a terrible commentator. So when it comes to this, like, who says you get to pick you? What do you know? What have you done? What have you? I'm not even insecure about it because I know ball. Like, again, I know ball. And here's the difference, though. Unlike saying, and let's use Anthony Richardson as an example here, because I might be getting fired. Like, if I was a general manager, you guys know how much I loved Anthony Richardson. And I would have taken him over C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young and Will Levis and all of them. I would have taken him with the number 1 pick. I would have taken him over Will Anderson. I would have taken him over everybody. Now, again, we would have coached him differently, significantly different, but I loved him. But the point I'm making is, I'm never going to back down from that because I know that general managers that do the job, I know that general managers, when they make that decision, they are putting their career on the line. And I will be blunt. I'm not sure I have ever done anything in my professional career that is equal to that. Like, I don't think I've ever woken up one morning and fretted about a decision for 10 months or however long it is that these guys do these things for, that everything I've worked my entire life for banks on this one choice. And I recognize that. So I understand how difficult the job is. And I understand the differences in the job. I don't have a psychiatrist working for me who's evaluated Anthony Richardson. They have. I don't have a coaching staff working for me and a scouting staff working for me. I don't have somebody that says, we did find out that he stole a pack of bubble gum from his best friend's backpack in the 7th grade. I don't know about that. I understand the differences. But I will also say this. Let's put a microphone in some of these guys, say, turn it on for 4 hours, go. Now, I'm not sure they could do well. Joel says, Paul Kaharski discounts your knowledge of the NFL, but he fails to remember that you learned something from the GM. So when PK was on the radio in Nashville on a full-time basis, when he had a full-time spot, PK was on a show that was essentially on before ours on the other station. And it killed me that that show with Chad and Hutton wasn't on the same station as ours with me and Floyd, because I would have loved the banter between the two shows. Now, the problem with the banter and Paul is, like, Paul sometimes makes things a little too personal, where it's like, dude, it's just football. Chill out. And it's really uncomfortable sometimes. And people just don't like people don't like that. But again, my point being is, Ian, I think there would have been some wars between Floyd and Paul back in the day.
You think so?
You remember how hard he used to laugh every time Vrabel would give him, the business on a question.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
And I mean, there would have been some wars. And so when it comes to Paul and what Paul says, or what Paul, I mean, Paul has an opinion just like I have an opinion. And Paul's opinion, no matter what he tells you, isn't any more rooted in knowledge than mine is. I think Will Levis stinks, and I don't know what Paul thinks, but if he thinks different, then I think he's wrong. And that's as simple as I think it is. Ethan is up next on the program. Ethan, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Hey, what's going on? I guess I just wanted to throw out my theory as to why first of all, why he got fired, and then also when it happened. Sure. If you're looking at spottrack.com, the Titans were number 2 in the NFL that year on cap space on the injury reserve list, and the teams that were on the opposite end of that ranking, Kansas City, Cincinnati, Buffalo, teams that are healthy. Every single 91 players in 2021, 76, however many on in 2022.
So you think the injuries is why he got fired in the middle of the season?
Oh, I think that maybe she placed like an arbitrary number of like how many players or how much money wasn't allowed to be wasted in that way. And when he hit that number, then dude.
Ethan, that's a hot take. I'm not sure I agree with it, but again, I think she hauled off and fired him. Like, I think that there were things that he did that pissed her off football-wise and non-football-wise, and I think that she viewed the A.J. Brown game as the opportunity to do it because they knew that they were going to beat Jacksonville the next week, and if they beat Jacksonville, they were going to win the division, and you can't fire your general manager after he wins 3 straight divisions. Trevor will join us next. We all know Trevor is very glass half full, and I love that about him, and I love him. But coming up next, what did he think of a Levis meltdown part 2? We will do that with Trevor next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. All right, it was a bad week, too. We know it. And again, not here to belabor how bad things are for the Titans. I know you'll say it's only 2 games. It's not fair. It's not right. It's not. I know. But it's bad. And when things are bad, especially when it comes to the Titans and it comes to the offensive line and it comes to the quarterback, there's nobody I'd rather talk to than Trevor Maddich from ESPN, who's presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics. When experience matters, Trevor, we start with Will Levis. Your reaction to week 2 after week 1.
Well, Will Levis can help you win games when he's not helping you lose them or causing you to lose them. I'm so frustrated with him. I don't mind it when a player makes a mistake or when he's not adequate physically, like the interception that he threw trying to hit Traylon Burks. That ball was just thrown short. And, hey, sometimes you throw the ball short. It happens. But the fumble down around the 6-yard line going in that cost them even a field goal attempt, that was a decision where the pocket was collapsing. He kind of dove, ended up in the air, tried to pull his inner Mahomes and make an amazing play rather than just have ball security and kick the field goal and move on from there. Turned out to be a horrific decision. It wasn't a physical mistake. It was a decision to not secure the ball when the defense had won the play. It was a decision that when the defense had won the play, he's going to try to make something spectacular happen anyway. And he did it last week against the Bears. And I thought you and I have talked about how, Jared, it's easier to slow a guy down than to speed him up. In other words, if a guy's out there just going crazy fast, it's easier to rein him in and have him slow down a little bit, make more sound decisions, et cetera, than it is to take a guy that's not capable of speeding up and try to push him. Well, we know that physically Will Levis has the ability to do a lot of really good things. But son of a gun, 2 weeks in a row, he made the kinds of decisions that cost you games, and they indeed cost them games. And at this point, you are what you are. At this point, I look at Will Levis and I see a guy who, yes, he's physically capable. Yes, he has good competitive nature and all that other stuff. But I see a guy who is reckless with the football. Mm-hmm. And he cost the team 2 weeks in a row. Now, will he do that for the next 15 games? Well, I don't know. He's done it 2 in a row. And so I am incredibly frustrated with his choices.
So if you were the coach, Trevor, what would you do?
Well, I think they're playing for upside. I mean, if the coaches think that they have a legitimate chance to go deep into the playoffs, then you've got to play the quarterback that's going to help you win.
Well,
and
hold on, Trevor, on that point.
This.
Well, on that point, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I actually said this yesterday, and I want your opinion on it, which is I said that, like, the Titans' defense right now is currently ranked number 1 in the NFL in total defense. They haven't forced a turnover yet, and so I think it's a good defense. I don't think it's an elite defense. If it's an elite defense, and we're talking like the 85 Bears you played in the Super Bowl or the 2000 Ravens with Ray Lewis, and like if it's that kind of defense, then I think you have to make the switch to Mason Rudolph because you could, in theory, go deep into the playoffs with your defense carrying you. But I don't think your defense is that good. So I would say stick with Levis and see what happens.
Well, it's one thing if the defense carries you because the offense isn't very good. It's another thing if the defense has to make up for boneheaded choices by the quarterback. That's a different kind of a problem. I see it a little bit differently. I really like this defense. I love how they attack. I love the 2 linebackers they brought in, Ernest Jones and Kenneth Murray, and how they use them to run off of the piles that the big guys up front make and get into the backfield. I mean, it's really aggressive. It's really fun to watch. And they've done a great job, and they're very capable. As far as the defense goes, as far as getting too deep into the playoffs, right? I don't know that this team can do that yet. I think there's still limitations at quarterback and offensive line to achieve that. But maybe they can kind of come close if the quarterback doesn't give up games But if I'm the coach, back to your original question, if I'm the coach, what do I do at the quarterback position? Do you sit the guy down and give up on him and move on with the backup? I think right now you've got to keep going with him and see if he will learn. He didn't learn from week 1 to week 2 to make better choices when it comes to ball security. Maybe he'll learn in week 3. And if he does, you can take a breath and say, okay, well, gee, he's now limiting some of those mistakes. If he does it again, then can he bar the door? Keep this in mind, too, about those choices. And again, I'm not talking about great strip by the defense. I'm not talking about throwing the ball into a dangerous place in traffic because it's 4th down and you're trailing in the 4th quarter. You have to take a risk. I'm talking about you're up 7-0 in the 2nd quarter and you do a boneheaded Patrick Mahomes cosplay and end up fumbling the ball away. That kind of a thing. But if he keeps doing it, I sit him down. The reason I sit him down is that everybody else on that team is working like crazy and they deserve the best chance to win. And you and I have spoken before that I think that Mason Rudolph, the backup, if you ask me which quarterback I would want from the Titans to win one game today, not necessarily in December, but today, it would be Mason Rudolph. What they believe, and I think most people do, is that down the road, the physical attributes of Will Levis mean that the ceiling for the position is higher with Levis once he figures out how to play the game well. But for now, right now, the coaches, if I'm the coach, I would not necessarily have a super short leash and the next mistake he makes, I pull him out, but I'm watching to see his choices. And again, let's differentiate between making a physical mistake and making a boneheaded choice.
Sure. I mean, I think we can both agree, the Burks interception, that's a physical mistake where you'd like him to put the ball out in front of Burks, or in the case of Burks, you'd like Burks to come away with that football. That's a physical mistake, but it's not a choice that he made to throw the ball short, as opposed to the choice he made to try to shovel past the ball in the air against the Chicago Bears that led to a pick six and cost them the game. I do understand the difference between the two. Trevor, how much, let's take that boneheaded play out of it. Were you encouraged by what you saw with Levis outside of that, or were you discouraged by what you saw from Levis against the Jets on Sunday?
Outside of the boneheaded play against the Bears, and actually 3 turnovers, he's got 5 turnovers in 2 weeks. But outside of that, and then the boneheaded attempt at a lateral against the Jets, I was encouraged because Levis looked like a lot of the time he was decisive. A lot of the time he was accurate. There was a play against the Jets where he checked to an audible and ended up throwing a pass. It was a great play. You could hear on the audio from the Parab mic where he was up at the line of scrimmage. He looked at the defense, then he said, kill, 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 kill. And then he dropped back into the shotgun. Well, that means we're going to kill the first play. We're going to run the second play. Right. And so he made a decision at the line, looked at the defense, made the right call. This is all part of the art of quarterbacking. And I looked at that and I thought, okay, this guy is showing the ability to lead from that position. And then he does this other crazy stuff. So except for the bad decisions, I have liked what I have seen in terms of his growth and his progress. But once again, if he doesn't stop it with the bad decisions, it doesn't matter. It's like you might like the band Jane's Addiction, but if the lead singer keeps trying to punch out the guitar player on stage during the show, well, it doesn't matter how good he can sing, right?
Trevor, I have to ask you this because you're the expert when it comes. I mean, this offensive line, you know me, I've been railing against the idea of Petit Ferrer as a starter. NFL Next Gen Stats said he gave up 13 pressures on Sunday, the most in a game allowed since 2018. Radin's had his struggles. And then there's the left side of the line, which Brian Callahan keeps saying improved from week 1 to week 2. I want your thought on what we saw out of that offensive line and if there's any chance that we can hope that they can shore it up. And we'll do that on the other side with Trevor. How was that for a tease? That's coming up next here on Stillman and Company. Trevor Matich, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics. Let's talk Window Nation. Did you know that most of your home's cold AC this summer leaked out through the windows? If you're like me and you get that NES bill, now I'm paperless, so I get it via the email, and I see that number, and I'm like, during the summer, I'm like, ah! And if that's the case, get the energy efficient windows from Window Nation. I had Window Nation out to my home. They did a fabulous job in terms of walking me through what they have. And then they were honest with me and told me, you know what? You don't need to change your windows out, but some of you aren't as lucky. So get with Window Nation. Right now, when you buy 2 windows, you get 2 windows free. And there is no limit on how much you could save. Plus, with 0 down and 0 interest and 0 payments for 24 months, you can keep on saving. That's 866-90-NATION or windownation.com to schedule a fast in-home estimate. And again, that's free. 866-90-NATION, windownation.com. Trevor, the offensive line was an unmitigated disaster against the Jets. I have my opinion on it. I want to hold it, though. I want to hear yours. Nicholas Petit-Ferrer gave up 13 pressures, according to Next Gen Stats. Blake Beddingfield, the former director of college scouting for the Titans, actually counted 9. 5 for Radens, who was next to him. It was a disastrous day. What do you make on the Titans' offensive line? And are we ready to finally give up on the idea that Petit-Ferrer can start in the NFL?
The offensive line had a miserable day, and I'm not ready to give up on Petit-Ferrer. I don't know that he's going to be a good starter. I know that this version of Nicholas Petit-Frere at right tackle is better than last year when he was a rookie pressed into service because of injury. He is it was 2 years ago. And then last year he was suspended in his second year for the first 6 games because of an issue that he had off the field. And then he came in and got hurt. So those 2 years, his rookie year and then last year, he wasn't really able to play. This year, I think, would be the year that we can look at him and say, okay, are we seeing a guy that is worthy of being a starter or a quality backup? And I think right now what we're seeing is some good things that would lead you to believe that he could become a quality backup and maybe a starter, we'll see. But in this particular game, he just got housed. He just, the whole offensive line really struggled. The Jets defense is really good, so let's give them some credit as well. But the thing about Petit-Frere at right tackle right now, it's not a matter of whether he is a starting right tackle in this league. Is there anybody better that they have right now? And the answer is no. I mean, they invested in left tackle. They invested in left guard with Skoronski a couple of years ago. They invested this year also in center with Lloyd Cushenberry, free agent coming over from Denver. And there wasn't anybody that they liked to invest the money in a right tackle, so they counted on Petit-Frere. Well, I think he's going to have a season that is going to be marginally adequate, which will be a massive upgrade from what he was
Based off of
his
what,
first 2
though? He
seasons.
was based off what? He was awful on Sunday.
Now, he can move. A lot of his pressures were he was driven back. I mean, actually, this is one of the plays I liked about Levis, where Petit-Frere was just driven right back into him. The defender reached around the corner and put his hands on Levis in the pocket. Levis shrugged that off and stepped up and completed a short outlet pass. So instead of a sack, it ended up being a short gain. But that was because Petit-Frere was driven back, and a lot of his negative plays were that way. A lot of Radens's negative plays were because he just got beat cleanly. The defensive tackle for the Jets would line up outside of him, and then at the snap, he would slant inside of him, and Radens wasn't able to react back quickly enough, and you'd have a free runner right up the middle. That happened a couple of times to Radens, and that's a whole lot worse than just getting driven back. And so neither one of them is preferable, but at least he stayed in front of the guy on a lot of the plays that turned out to be negative plays in the grade.
Trevor, I wonder about the left side of the line. Brian Callahan has kind of pumped their tires a little bit, saying they played much better, Latham and Skoronski, week 1 to week 2. Did you see the same thing?
No. From an effectiveness standpoint, in week 1, it looked like they were blocking guys that they were at least Latham at left tackle seemed to be on the right guy much of the time. Skoronski had a pretty lousy game in week 1 against the Bears. I think he was less awful than he was in week 1, so at least that's good. He improved from awful to less awful, so that's good at left guard. But at the same time, there were plenty of times when it looked like those guys weren't quite sure who to block and someone was running free, and it was hard for me to tell sometimes which guy, left guard or left tackle, was supposed to block that guy, because you have different combinations and things like that. And unless I know what they're being asked to do in the film room, in practice, then it's hard to say. But between the two of them, the book on them is stunts. In other words, if you're on defense and you're scouting J.C. Latham at left tackle and Peter Skoronski at left guard, you want to run twists and stunts with the defensive line in front of them, because those guys get on different levels and they're not able to switch off, and they're not able to stay in front of their guy in a man pickup of that stunt. In other words, man-to-man instead of switching off. Either way, they're not able to handle stunts right now. And I'm running stunts at them all the time if I'm a defense scheming for what to do against this team.
Trevor, I do wonder, can this line be fixed by Bill Callahan?
Yes, because I think there's on the left side, center, left guard, left tackle, I think there's a lot of talent there. And, I think Cushenberry's been fine. He's had a couple of moments that I'm sure he wishes he had back, but he's been largely solid, I think. But Latham and Skoronski, they're still young guys, but you can see their capability. You can see that these guys can meld into a solid pair. And really, offensive linemen, it's not just how good you are, it's how you play together. And the best offensive lines in the NFL are the ones that typically have the same 5 guys that have been starting for 5 years with each other, right? On the right side, Rayton's at right guard, the best he can be is a quality backup, in my opinion. I think that's his ceiling, which is a lot better than it was earlier in his career with his team. But you've seen him get better. You've seen him, go from awful to decent. You don't win deep into the playoffs with decent, but at least you can hold down the position until you get somebody in there that can drive things forward. Right tackle is still a real problem. Right. And so they've got to scheme. They've got to do whatever they can. They've got to hope that Nicholas Petit-Frere will grow over there. So at least he can hold down the spot better until they bring in somebody to compete with them. But overall, can Bill Callahan, the offensive line coach, can he fix this? On the left side, I think, yes, absolutely. On the right side, you have to define what success is. And on the right side, success is not going out there and blasting people. On the right side, the success will be defined as block the right guy, stay in front of him, and just don't be on roller skates and get shoved back into the quarterback all the time like Petit-Frere did against the Jets.
Trevor, on the college football front, I believe Tennessee will beat Oklahoma this week. I think they should. And I think that Texas might be the only team in the country that I feel is significantly better than Tennessee. I would still pick Georgia, even though I was unimpressed with them Saturday. I would pick Georgia over Tennessee. They'll meet in Athens. But, Trevor, I think the Vols might be a national title contender. Am I too over the top in that?
You are not too over the top. The one thing, there are 2 things that they needed to show. One was that the young quarterback wouldn't make big mistakes. His biggest test was NC State, and he just rolled over NC State. This is Nico Iamaleava. So far against competition that hasn't really pushed him, he has been really good at not making mistakes, and he's made big plays. The other is the secondary. They lost 11 guys from last year's secondary to the portal, the draft, or to injuries. They've got a lot of new guys in there, but that pass rush is so ferocious that the secondary is being given time to grow. And they've got talent. It's just chemistry back there. So as long as those 2 things hold up, then yes, Tennessee is a contender to go deep into the playoff. And I will tell you this, that right now I'm working on building a telestrated breakdown for ESPN for probably Thursday, and then Saturday also we'll probably show it again. And they wanted me to find something on Nico. And so I'm watching his game so far, and mostly I'm zeroing in on NC State because that was the only Power 4 team that they played so far. And what we've got basically in that game is, okay, Nico, he threw the ball well there. He ran the ball well there. Okay, nice throw. And I'm thinking, okay, well, everybody else is going to do Nico. Watch him throw it good. Watch him run it good, right? But what's really standing out to me is that the offensive line is hilarious for the Volunteers. I mean, those guys bury their opponent. I mean, they will drive them into the ground and then land on them, like Ric Flair used to do in the ring. I mean, it's so much fun to watch. And there were so many plays in the NC State game alone that I just sat back and laughed at how a Tennessee offensive lineman just crushed somebody in embarrassing fashion that, we're not going to be able to show them all. So the breakdown is going to be in part this vicious offensive line that is enabling the young quarterback to have time to throw and space to run. And when you have an offensive line like that, you've got a chance to do a lot of things. I love this Tennessee team.
Trevor Matich, as always, is presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trevor, great stuff. We will talk to you after the Oklahoma game. We will talk to you next week.
Thanks, Jared.
Yep, Trevor Matich is always on the program. So Trevor says on the right side, but it could get better on the left side. I like how he described Peter Skoronski, who was, he said, awful against Chicago and less awful against the Jets, but still buys the chance that PT, who is, by the way, now a fantasy football analyst for a gambling company, a year after he was suspended for gambling, PT now has a little side hustle going on, which is honestly an embarrassment. Like, that's embarrassing. Like, and I understand guys have podcasts and guys, but he got suspended for gambling last year. That would be like, hey, this is PT for FanDuel. It's like, ugh. But he sucks anyway, so who cares? 615-737-1025. So Trevor says roll with Levis, and if he makes another bonehead mistake, yank him, which I think is how a lot of people feel. But D-Mace says it's not that simple. And he said something yesterday on the midday show that I think may be something Brian Callahan's having to deal with. We'll get to that coming up next. 615-737-1025. It's Stillman and Company on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. So I love D. Mace, and I love Chris Sanders. And I don't agree with everything that they say or do, and I'm sure they don't agree with everything that I say or do. But I do love having them on the show, and I love doing the pregame show, and I love their insight. And I love it because they played the game. In the case of D. Mace, he was an all-pro Tennessee Titan. Plus, he's like here, he gets it here, so on and so forth. And it doesn't mean that everything he says is gospel. And again, there are tons of things he says that I disagree with. But there is an insight that he has, which is that of a former player. And I'll never forget, either he or Chris said something one time, and I almost drove my car off the road. And the next day, I told the GM during the show, during a commercial break, I said, you know, I heard Derek say this, or I heard Chris say this, and I almost drove my car off the road. And he looked at me and he goes, oh, yeah, players don't know. And then he used words you can't use on the radio. And he said, they know what they used to do. So he goes, if I wanted to know about receiver play, especially in the slot, Derek would know. He goes, that's what he would be. They know it through and through. He says, we never spent time teaching Derek what the right guard is supposed to do. So that's why, again, if you listen to Derek, he'll talk about deferring to Trevor when it comes to the offensive line. But the one thing that I never overlook is Derek's understanding of the dynamics inside of the locker room. And so yesterday, after Will Levis had cost the Titans a second straight game to start 0-2, D. Mace, of all people, when everybody's saying it's just one mistake, it's just one game, we're 2 games in, everybody chill out, it'll be okay, give Levis more time, D. Mace wasn't hearing that.
I just want to know from Titans fans, when is enough? Because, again, you're saying give him a little bit more time. How much more time do you need to give him? Honestly, that's a real question. It's like, how much time do you want to see Will Levis underneath center and making these same mistakes that he's made, not just this year, but he made them last year as well. So how much longer do you want him underneath center? Because the longer it seems like he's underneath center, it seems like the more he's going to make these types of mistakes. Again, if you've listened to this show, which I know you have over the last 2 weeks, I'm not saying, throw Will out with the bathwater. Hey, if you want to give him an opportunity to redeem himself, go ahead and do it. But I just want fans to know that the longer they continue to stick with him and the more Will Levis continue to do these same things, the more you're going to lose this locker room. The more guys are going to be looking at you as the head coach or the offensive coordinator or the GM like, y'all brought in the backup for a reason, a guy that has won games in this league, that has led his team to a playoff for a reason. Use them, because it seems like this is not working. That's what it's about, doing what's important for the franchise. And starting Will Levis may be the best thing for the franchise. But if it doesn't change, that's what I'm saying. If this doesn't change, how long is too long for fan bases? Because the same person that called and said, give him a little bit more time. If they lose these next 2 games, you're going to be looking to say, yeah, it's about time to bench him.
I mean, he made his feelings pretty well known there. And again, I go back to the insight. I go back to the locker room, where I've never been a football player in the NFL. And I can assume how a football player would feel, but I'm not sure that I really have the basis of knowledge to say, hey, they may lose the locker room over Will Levis because they look at Mason Rudolph and they say, hey, Mason Rudolph, he might be a better option. He might. Every time a microphone is in front of a Titan player, they will say, Will Levis, we believe in him. He's done a great job. We know it's only 2 games. We're close. But what do they actually think? And I don't know. And again, Derek doesn't know exactly how Calvin Ridley feels. But who do you think has a better chance of understanding how Calvin Ridley would feel? Me, you, or Derek? And the answer is Derek. And he basically said, all right, fans, how long you want to go? How much more time do you want to give Will Levis? Because if you keep waiting on it, you might lose the locker room. And Derek said, hey, a little bit of a warning here that while I think, hey, there's the bye in a couple of weeks and they can wait for this and they can wait for that. And Derek says, don't wait too late.
But now, if they lose the next 2 games, you're out of it. You're completely out of it, because I don't think even putting Mason Rudolph in the game, I'm not sure that he can dig you out of the hole that you dug yourself with the help of the quarterback, with the help of special teams, with the help of other areas on your team. I'm not sure he's going to be able to dig you out of that hole.
I mean, it sounds to me, again, I don't want to put words in his mouth, Ian, but it sounds to me like he'd be in favor of benching Will Levis.
I mean, maybe. Yeah. Sounds like
it sounds to me like he's telling you, hey, if you don't bench Will Levis and you lose, you're going to lose the locker room and the season's going to be over. That's what I get out of that. And you can argue with D Mace all you want. Call their show tomorrow between 11 and 2 o'clock. And you can argue with him if you want. I'm not arguing with him. I understand exactly what he's saying. Now, I wouldn't bench Levis if I were the coach, but I feel like I need to understand where Derek is coming from. And it's the mindset of the guys in the locker room. I keep holding this firm belief that is, if you think the Titans defense is elite, if you think it is a defense that is elite, that could carry a team through the playoffs, make the change. Because you are 2-0, in my opinion, if Mason Rudolph is your quarterback. And I don't even think Mason Rudolph is good, but I do think Mason Rudolph can manage a game. All you needed in week 1 and week 2 was a game manager. Kerry Collins in 2008 was a game manager. And I don't even think he threw for 3,000 yards that year. And he managed you to 13-3 because Albert Hainsworth and Kyle Vandenbosch and Keith Bullock and Chris Hope and Cortland Finnegan led a dominant defense coached by Jim Schwartz. It's doable. We see it all the time. Minnesota got to the NFC title game with Case Keenum as their starting quarterback. And if you listen to Robbie and Joe, Mason Rudolph's great and Case Keenum sucks. So the point here is Derek's telling you, Brian Callahan, that if you don't consider making a change and this team loses, it might be too late. And you might lose the locker room. And again, I'm not saying whether or not Derek is right or Derek is wrong. And I'm sure there are some people, even maybe Brian Callahan, and I'm not putting words in his mouth either. But, I mean, I'm sure there are some guys that are like, oh, no, they won't lose the locker room. You know, if he makes a bonehead, we'll pull him out. We'll put in the next guy. And, you know, if not, they understand this is a business and they got to do what's in the best interest of the team. And Brian Callahan was on that Bengals team in 2019 that tanked when they put Ryan Finley in at quarterback and all of that. But I'm just telling you what he said. And he would have more of an understanding of how these things work inside the locker room than you would, than I would, and even more so than Brian Callahan would. So just keep that in mind. And make of that what you will. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. What about the owner? Willie had a great question today for Tim Hasselbeck about maybe if you were to make the move to Rudolph, how do you sell the owner on it? I do think that's important, what Tim Hasselbeck had to say. We'll do that in your phones. We'll do it next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
How much confidence do you have in Levis?
I got plenty of confidence in Will. I believe in everything he's done so far, and we just got to keep working to get better. And he's made some mistakes that are costly, and I think he's learning from them. It's a painful lesson, and there's things that I'm learning about him that are helping me call the game better for him. And we're just going to keep at it. And there's really nowhere else to go but keep fixing mistakes and then trying to go win a football game. So that's ultimately where we're at, and I believe in Will and what he's capable of. And I thought his improvement this week was good. Obviously, the error aside, but there's been a lot of things he's gotten better at this week that I was happy with and pleased with.
There you go. That was Brian Callahan talking about Will Levis. Doesn't sound like a benching is in the offing anytime soon. Adam Schefter saying, I think it'd be a little bit before they make that move. And D Mace is like, all right, well, you might lose the locker room if that happens. Tim Hasselbeck was on the midday show today, and they asked, hey, Amy highlighted Will Levis when she fired Mike Vrabel, and they hired Brian Callahan for Will Levis. And so, I hate to say it, but, how do you convince her 2 games in, even with the boneheadedness, if you wanted to make a change? Here is what Willie asked Tim Hasselbeck.
It might be a tough sell, especially to Amy Adams Strunk, who basically hired Brian Callahan to try to bring out the best in Will Levis. It would not look good to scrap it after 2 games. So could you sell this, Tim? I'm taking a step back with my young guy. I want to see what it looks like with the other guy, but my full intention is to bring him back in as the starter down the road after a game or two. It's a tough sell. I wonder how the owner would take that, knowing how much of a wild card the owner is. But could you sell that?
Yeah, I definitely think you could sell a plan. Like, hey, this is what we're doing. We're not turning the page, but like this is our plan. Like, we're not scrapping it. We still believe in him. We're still going to develop him. But sometimes we do think it's necessary in extreme situations to take a step back and watch someone from the sideline. I want to be the first person that had that idea for the development of a quarterback. But I also I would argue, that you get better by doing it and making the mistakes.
Okay. Here's what I'll say to that. And again, Tim's a coach, and Tim played quarterback in the NFL, and I didn't. But here's what I would say to that. If you bench him, you're done. And I use the Carolina Panthers as an example. I think what happened in Carolina is the owner hauled off and had to blame somebody for why they suck so bad. And he's blaming the quarterback. Because last year he blamed the coach and he blamed the general manager, and now he's blaming the quarterback. Now, I haven't seen anything from Carolina to have an opinion as to tell you whether or not Bryce Young is or is not the problem. What I would tell you when it comes to Carolina is I would tell you that I think the owner is very irrational. And when the coach keeps saying, Bryce is our guy, it rings kind of hollow, because if Bryce was your guy, you'd be playing Bryce. Well, I haven't seen the highlights, or I should say the lowlights, that Will Levis has put out there surrounding Bryce Young. Maybe they exist. I don't know. I haven't watched, but I assume that it probably hasn't been as bad. If you make the move, you make the move. If you make the move, you've given up on Levis. Personally, I wouldn't be making the move. But I also don't care if they go the other way. Like, if they turn around and decide, you know what, we're giving up on Levis and we're moving on, I'm not going to fight it. Because, again, Blake Beddingfield, who I have a ton of respect for, this is the guy, when he was the director of college scouting, who convinced the Titans to draft Derrick Henry. And he was rewarded for that by being fired. But he convinced them to draft Derrick Henry. This guy wrote today at Koharski's website that Will Levis reminds him of Blaine Gabbert. That's right. Blaine Gabbert, who stinks. So, I mean, it's funny because I think Rex Ryan's been listening to the morning show, because he went on TV and said, you ain't Brett Favre. Yep. And I know that last week Joe was saying, well, Brett Favre. And I'm like, I wonder if Rex, when he's around town driving, hears Joe, and Rex Ryan's like, dude, you ain't Brett Favre.
Have to address Joe Rexrode on the TV here.
I do not believe that I never bought this whole, Brett Favre did crazy stuff. Yeah. When did Brett flip it to the other team to up by 1 in the fourth quarter kind of thing. So if you make the change, I'm not upset about it. But let's all be in agreement here. And I love Tim saying, well, you could sell the owner on a plan, and if you make the change, you make the change. If you make the change, you're done. Now, you can go back and play him, but you're not playing him as your starting quarterback. Like the idea that Levis is your franchise quarterback, it's gone. Which, again, it's gone for me anyway, so I don't care. But I would just say it's not as simple as, oh, no. We still believe. We just think you need to sit here and watch for a little bit. That never ends well. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025 here on our program. One texter says, hey, Amy, and our phone lines are by WilsonCountyHunter.com. Hey, Amy, I know Will didn't do these dumb things under the last coach, but since I got here, he has gotten dumber and I can't fix him. Yeah, I bet that would go over great. So I do believe that Will Levis did a bunch of dumb stuff last year. Now, was it as glaringly stupid as the 2 mistakes that he made in the last 2 weeks? No. But I keep going back to the Pittsburgh game. Sometimes I think I say things and people like, you probably don't remember the Pittsburgh game. And I understand it. I had a friend of mine who, my friends that I went to high school with, her dad, I've known him forever. And he's a neurosurgeon. And he said to me or I guess he's a neurologist, which I assume is kind of the same thing. And he said to me one time, he's like, man, how do you know the stuff you know? And I'm like, this is my job. He's like, I know, but it's just there's so much detail. And I'm like, I know. And when you're doing neurology, I'm looking up Alexander Carrier's contract. Like that's what I do. So you kind of probably remember the Pittsburgh game last year, but you probably don't remember the details of it. I do. And I remember at the end of the game when Will Levis was out there literally playing hero ball. He was trying to win the game in the fourth quarter on one throw. And DeAndre had to, bat a pass away from a defensive back, and a Pittsburgh guy dropped the ball, and a Pittsburgh guy intercepted the ball. And it was like, you can't do that. The next week against Tampa Bay, he starts doing the same thing, and Tim Kelly takes the ball out of his hands and starts calling bubble screens for Kyle Phillips. Because at that point, Tim Kelly's like, I do not trust you to make a good decision, so I'm going to lead you to water. You're going to do what I say, even though it doesn't give us much of a chance to win the game, because I don't trust your decision-making. And again, I don't think that was the wrong thing to do for Tim Kelly. So he had traces of moron stuff last year. But he was a rookie, and we could say, oh, he's a rookie, it'll be okay. Kind of what they're probably saying in Chicago about Caleb Williams. He's a rookie, it'll be okay. It'll be, it's fine. Oh, yeah. So, again, I'm just saying, like, I don't think it's like, oh, well, the Vrabel's coaching staff coached him up well. That I'm not sure I totally believe in. Craig says, even if you have given up on Levis, why put Rudolph in? The only thing he is capable of is winning you enough games to not pick a quarterback at the top of the draft next year. We have a similar thought, which is, I say we don't win for Quinn, that being Quinn Ewers at Texas, who I do like. I mean, I haven't studied Quinn Ewers, but I would
He keeps getting hurt.
I like Quinn Ewers. I also saw some of the highlights of Arch the other day. A boy can play now. I mean, he's big and fast.
On the Titans. Oof.
Oh, goodness gracious. For whatever that's worth.
Well, there are people who want to put in Mason Rudolph because they believe this is a good roster. And the only thing holding them back is the quarterback.
Well, I keep telling you, it's the defense. If you think the defense is elite, if you think you can win because of your defense, make the change. A lot of people don't know. Do you guys remember the old quarterback, Tony Banks? Tony Banks, the Ravens went like 6 weeks in 2000, the year that they won the Super Bowl. They went like 6 weeks where they didn't score a touchdown. And I remember there was a highlight that was run, those random Subway commercials where they say like, this Subway play of the last week was Justin Herbert with an 85-yard touchdown pass to Josh Palmer. That's the Subway play of the week, or whatever it is. I remember there was one when it was like, the Ravens haven't scored a touchdown in 5 weeks, but they did last week when quarterback Tony Banks threw an interception returned for a touchdown by Titans linebacker Randall Godfrey. And that was a game the Titans went on the road against that Ravens defense, and they beat Baltimore. Rodney Thomas, may he rest in peace, caught the game-winning touchdown pass. But they went on the road, they beat the Ravens, and at that point, Brian Billick said, enough's enough, and he put Trent Dilfer in. If you think this defense is that good, and I do not, then you go to Rudolph. That's what I would say there. A lot of people are bringing up the blocked punts. I mean, I would just say when it comes to the blocked punts, even with those, if Levis doesn't piss away the game, you still win. But on the blocked punt front, if they don't block the first punt in the Chicago game, you win. And I would just say that, to me, it's 3 strikes and you're out. If another punt gets blocked, whoever is responsible for that gets cut, and I think you fire the special teams coach. And if I was Brian Callahan, I'd make it clear as day to Colt Anderson, one more and you're out. Because at some point you can say it's inexcusable and unacceptable, but when you keep accepting it, then, then it is acceptable. So I think the block punt, to me, that's a simple. They block another one this year, you're out, period. And I think this is where, again, Brian Callahan is a really nice guy, and he says he's got that mean streak in him, and he can put his foot down. Let's see. Let's see if another punt gets blocked and he doesn't fire the special teams coach. And I'm not saying he should fire the special teams coach today. I am saying that if he did, I'd understand. But if another one gets blocked, he's fired, period. And there's no discussion about it, in my opinion. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. A lot of you want to weigh in on this. Plus, boy, a lot of Titan fans got really, really mad at me last night, and I'm not sorry about it. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
There's a lot of conversation about the big guys on this Titans defense, but Harold Landry had 2 sacks in this last game against the Jets, and he kind of continues to be this presence within the defense. What does he contribute?
Just that. I mean, when you have an edge rusher that gets production on the quarterback, and then you have 2 interior players that are difficult to handle, and then Arden has done a really nice job in his role, it affects the way that the quarterback feels. I mean, we all know that when the quarterback feels pressure and they get hit, they don't like it. And Harold's done a really good job of producing on the quarterback. And one of the sacks this week and one of them last week was really because of the unselfishness of Jeff Simmons' rush. You know, they're in a game, and all Jeff's job to do is just to occupy and penetrate vertically, and Harold's looping, and Harold does a great job finishing the loop. And finishing on the quarterback, but a lot of that's because there's other guys working to help get them open. Just like on offense, when your receivers are running around out to clear space, Jeff's clearing space so Harold can go rush. And I think that's what makes that unit really good, is they're all really unselfish.
There you go. That was Brian Callahan. And yesterday I criticized Jeffrey Simmons because when I got my team yearbook at the game on Sunday, it had Jeffrey Simmons' picture on there along with Calvin Ridley and Will Levis, and I think L'Jarius Sneed was on there, and I think there's somebody else. I can't remember who else was on there. But Harold Landry was not. And I said, where's Harold Landry? He's the one getting the sacks. He's got 3 sacks so far this year. Where's Harold Landry? He's the one hitting the quarterback. Simmons has no sacks, no sacks, no tackle for losses, and no quarterback hits. Oh, my God, did the Boo-Hoo crew on Twitter cry about it all last night, Ian?
Yeah, I guess that sounds about right.
Just crying, and crying.
Not our boy Kenston.
No, Kinston's actually on our side on this one. Thank you, Kinston. And the concept is what Brian Callahan said, which is the reason Harold Landry is getting the sacks is because of Jeffrey Simmons. Okay?
Well, it did look like on that one, I guess it was it the Bears game, where I think he took like 3 offensive linemen with him.
That's fine. But again, when you pay Jeffrey Simmons $23.5 million, are you paying Jeffrey Simmons $23.5 million to get other people sacks, or are you paying him $23.5 million for him to get sacks? And the answer, and I know it's a team game, the answer is you're paying for him to get the sacks. I will never forget, and I love every time this comes up, because again, Simmons has never recorded a 12 sacks or a 10 sack season in his career. And when Jadeveon Clowney was a free agent, the Titans ended up signing him. And remember, you guys were all on board, and then you weren't. But when Clowney was out there, we would talk about it every day. It was during COVID, and there was nothing going on, and the draft had already passed. So this little nugget that Diana Rossini says the Titans are in contact with Jadeveon Clowney would lead to 4 hours of just us talking about it. Floyd kept saying, defensive linemen know that they're paid for sacks. They're not paid for these win rate metrics. They're paid to sack the quarterback. And they know that the difference between an all-pro and a good player are sacks. They know it. And I ask you this when it comes to Simmons. And again, if you wanted to tell me Simmons was a really, really good player, well, if you wanted to tell me Simmons was a good player, period. I'm not arguing that. But if you wanted to tell me that Simmons was an elite player in the class of Chris Jones, well, he's never been that. Chris Jones had double-digit sacks last year, missed all of training camp, and sat out the first game because he wanted a new contract. Chris Jones dominates in the playoffs to where his team wins in large part because of him and Mahomes. Simmons' teams won 6 games over the last 2 years. So somebody help me out. Again, when they put Aaron Donald in the Hall of Fame, are they going to talk about the sacks that Aaron Donald created? Or are they going to talk about the sacks that Aaron Donald had for other people? Because the answer is it'll be about the sacks Aaron Donald recorded. If you want to say Simmons is a good player, well, there's a lot of good players on this team. Chidobe Awuzie is a good player. Ernest Jones is a good player. Amani Hooker's a good player. Harold Landry's a good player. There are plenty of good players on this team, but they don't treat Jeffrey Simmons the same way they treat Chidobe Awuzie. They treat Jeffrey Simmons like he's a superstar. Well, if you want to be treated like a superstar, you need to produce like a superstar. And my guess would be, without going back and watching the tape on Aaron Donald with the Rams, I guarantee you Aaron Donald opened up things for other guys. Guarantee it. Just like I guarantee Tyreek Hill opens up things for other guys on that Dolphins team. You know that tight end they have, Smythe? He's really more of a backup. But you want to know why Smythe gets a lot of catches? Because they're worried about Tyreek and Jalen Waddle. But again, Tyreek still scores touchdowns. Tyreek still gets big yards. Trust me, they double team him too. If you watch the Justin Jefferson 90-plus yard touchdown last week, you'll see there are 2 49er players running with him. You want to know why there are 2 49er players running with him? Because Justin Jefferson is always going to have 2 guys around him. That's what happens when you're a good player. But again, those good players produce. Those good players get big stats. Derrick Henry was the most effective at helping everybody else out the year that he ran for 2,000 yards. A.J. Brown had over 1,000 yards receiving. Corey Davis was right there, just a little bit below. Ryan Tannehill had the best year of his career. The Titans had the second-ranked offense. And Derrick still got 2,000 now because he produces. And Derrick Henry on this team was a superstar. Simmons is not. So if you think all of this bull crap about saying, see, look at this one play where Big Jeff opened up a hole for somebody else is going to make me think that he's a superstar, it ain't going to work. By the way, I don't know this, but who led the Chicago Bulls in assists from 1991 to 1998? I have no idea who it would have been. B.J. Armstrong, John Paxson, Scottie Pippen, Steve Kerr, Ron Harper. I don't know. I can guess off the top of my head who led the Chicago Bulls in scoring. You see what I'm saying? So enough with the crying. Go make the plays. And if you make the plays, you won't hear me complain. Have you noticed, as much as I talked about L'Jarius Sneed's knees and all the things they said, you haven't heard me talk about Sneed or his knees at all because he's playing. Have you noticed you haven't heard me talk about Tony Pollard and about, I'm not sure if Tony Pollard's any good. No, I know Tony Pollard's good because Tony Pollard produces. The guy who I'm skeptical about is Spears. And that's because even though Spears has showed some nice highlights here and there, Spears is yet to really take over a game in his career. There's a difference. Sean says Simmons is better than average. That's it. Prove me wrong. I mean, I think he's significantly better than average. But again, significantly better than average and a superstar, I think, are 2 totally different things. Ben says elite defenses would get turnovers. This is a patchwork defense, and this roster needed more than one offseason to fix it. I'll say this because a lot of these Titan fans, I feel like there's a certain level of credibility that I feel entitled to because I only spent all offseason complaining about right tackle. And people would tell me, oh, no, Jared Nicholas Petit-Frere, a.k.a. PT, who has a PT job working for a fantasy football outlet. PT is going to be the guy who's going to come in and Bill Callahan will coach him. And I'm like, you guys do realize PT sucked last year, right? Oh, but Jared, he had the gambling suspension. Right. You do realize that's a bad thing though, right? Well, yeah, but then he got hurt. Okay. You realize he wasn't that good as a rookie, right? Oh, no. Bill Callahan, you'll see. PT gave up according to Next Gen Stats. And again, I really didn't think it was this bad, but it's the stat. He gave up 13 pressures on Sunday. Jermaine Illuminor, who signed for $7 million with the New York Giants, has given up 5 pressures over 2 games. PT gave up 13 in one game. So I think I'm entitled to a little credibility here when it comes to the right tackle spot, because I only spent the entire offseason talking about it, telling the coach the story, all the things you guys know. And now right tackle's an unmitigated disaster for this team. But nope, all that's happened is I think Jared Stillman just says these things to work people up. No, I say them because they're true. You get worked up because deep down in your heart, you know it's true too, but you want to hold on to the idea that this guy that you love is a superstar. That's the difference. People will say, Jared's just trying to get under Big Jeff's skin. I don't care. He's got me blocked on Twitter. He doesn't see it anyways. He doesn't like me. He's never going to like me. I'm not upset about it. I don't care. And I am not trying to get invited to his parties. And I'll live. It'll be okay. I mean, it's just the amount of crying over it. Don't cry at me. Go get some sacks. Skyler says Simmons cost the team on Sunday. The late hit on Rodgers was unacceptable. It would have been 3rd and 15. You know, all I remember about that play is I remember Levis got a roughing the passer call earlier in the game, and they showed the replay on the Jumbotron, and I did not see
It was a weak call.
roughing the passer. And I'm like, that's a weak call. And then I saw that one, and I'm like, well, it's probably going to be a makeup call. And then I saw the replay. I mean, Simmons hit him in the head and grabbed his face mask.
Hand was in the face mask. Yeah.
You can't do that. Well, his hand got hit, and
It was
should have been-
accidental,
okay.
but still.
Okay. You can't do that. I mean, it's just, those are the rules. I didn't write them. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025 here on the program. We'll get back to some of your phones. Plus, speaking of my credibility, and speaking of the right tackle position with the PT thing, we know I was right about that. There's another one that I just wonder if it's too early to say I told you so. We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Second down 9. Darnold getting messy, going deep, and he's got Jefferson. He's got Jefferson. It's a foot race downfield with Brown. Shifting gears. Getting a block. That's 6.
Ian, is it too early for I Told You So's on Sam Darnold?
It's only been 2 weeks, dog.
Is it too early?
Yes.
I mean, I told you all, Sam Darnold. How long have I been on my Sam Darnold kick for? Like 2 years now?
2 years. I don't know
Since
about
the
that.
end of the Carolina run. That was the end of 22.
I remember you were trying to hype him up this summer, but
I was talking about how, I think it was last year, we got into the whole Sam Darnold versus Tua argument. And Joe and TD and everyone, Sam Darnold. And I just brushed everybody and every single one of you callers and texters. I just brushed every single one of you off. I thought the stupidest thing Arthur Smith did as head coach of the Falcons was not getting Sam Darnold into backup Desmond Ridder last year. They would have made the playoffs with Sam Darnold as the quarterback, and Sam Darnold would be the starting quarterback in Atlanta right now, and they wouldn't have spent $45 million on Cousins, and they wouldn't have Michael Penix, and they've used the 8th pick. But let me just say this. I knew Sam Darnold could be a starting quarterback in this league based upon what he did at the end of his tenure in Carolina. When Tepper stepped out of it, the problem in Carolina is the owner Tepper. When he stepped out of it and fired Matt Rule, who's a bozo, with DJ Moore at receiver, Darnold played very, very well. Good QBR. They were 4-2. They got back in the playoff race. Everything. If you watched those games, which I did, most people didn't. So I knew that whenever I brought up Sam Darnold, people were just going to just thinking of the Jets Sam Darnold that they remember, who was coached by Adam Gase. But my theory with Adam Gase is he's terrible and Ryan Tannehill's the example. And so now Sam Darnold gets a fair shot. Offensive coach Kevin O'Connell, number 1 wide receiver in Justin Jefferson. And now he is producing. And I would love it because Robbie and Joe, they go on their little Beavis and Butthead tangents with and they did a lot of that when it came to Sam Darnold, especially my Sam Darnold over Tua thing. Forget about the concussions for a second. Ian, Sam Darnold or Tua?
Tua.
Based off of what?
More than 2 games.
Tua's not beating the 49ers.
Okay.
Over the last 2 years, Tua has beaten 1 playoff team.
Okay.
1 playoff team. Dallas by 2 at home. Darnold just beat the 49ers, who might be the best team in the NFL.
Yeah, well, San Francisco coming off a short week on the road, noon kickoff.
Again, you guys go ahead.
No
pay
McCaffrey.
Tua $55 million. Pay
Debo
Trevor
hurt.
Lawrence $55 million. Pay these average guys $55 million. I'll pay Darnold 10 and beat you. And I'm loving me some Sam Darnold.
Not if you don't have that coach in Jefferson.
But I do have him. Vincent is up next on the program. Vincent, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on Simmons. Let's not forget that he gave up. It was either the go-ahead touchdown or the tying touchdown. The running back bounced right off of him, streaked up the sidelines into the end zone. But anyway.
I don't think Simmons was on the field on that play, but.
Yeah, he was. He was slamming his hand on the ground because he missed the tackle. But anyway, when are we going to unveil Sweat? I've been waiting on this unveiling of Sweat because that's all we heard all offseason. Oh, he's a dog. He's a dog. When is he going to make his
I thought
appearance?
Devondre Sweat, Vincent, thank you. I thought Devondre Sweat was excellent in week 1. I didn't really notice Devondre Sweat in week 2. And I think that the feelings on Devondre Sweat are either like that caller or the Devondre Sweat's the best. And I'm like, week 1, he was very good. Week 2, didn't notice him. All right, that's it for us. We are out of here. The Chase and Big Joe replays next. Stillman and Company. Tomorrow, Will Levis talks again. Let's see if he makes up any players on the Packers. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company. We'll see y'all tomorrow, too.